one, the power of many. No truer words could be spoken at this time. As we continue to navigate the pandemic, our volunteers have stepped up and on behalf of all members of council, thank you. Thank you for your dedication to this community. You were asked and you put your hands up, so thank you very much. Councillor Gerber, if you would read the land acknowledgement, please.
Yes, certainly, Your Worship. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you, Councillor Gerber. And we have one addition to the agenda. The bylaw and the recommendation that item 14.3 be added to the agenda under bylaws as bylaw number 2021-26, bylaw to appoint an interim chief administrative officer for the corporation of the Township of Wilmot. That is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? And seeing none, I think the first thing we should do is pass the recommendation for, where are you? Get myself all confused here. We should pass the recommendation for bylaw number 2021-26, just to make it official so that Ms. Jackson is officially part and in her acting CAO position. So the recommendation is to pass bylaw number 2021-26 to appoint interim chief administrative officer for the corporation of the Township of Wilmot. So that is moved by. Oh, and it's read the first, second, and third time and finally passed in open council. So that is Councillor Fisher, Councillor Gerber. All in favor? Oh, nobody hesitated. We're good. Thank you very much. And welcome, Acting Chief Administrative Officer Jackson. Thank you. Next item is that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as presented. Regular council meeting, April 12, 2021. That is moved by Councillor Gordy, Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. So the first item is public meeting. At this time, we would be holding the public meeting for the procedural bylaw. No one from the public has registered to address this matter, and staff is requesting that the procedural bylaw be deferred. Would a member of council want to move that motion? Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item we have is the presentation from the auditors. Mr. Kelly, would you like to introduce, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce Mike Arndt. Mike is from Graham Matthew Professional Corporation. They've been the municipal auditors for a number of years now. Before Mike gives his presentation, I just want to recognize him and the team at Graham Matthew undertaking an audit in COVID pandemic and doing everything remotely, every meeting remotely, every review and long calls with staff over the computer is a challenge, but Mike's team was up to it, and we successfully completed the audit on the schedule, back on our regular schedule. So I thank Mike for that. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Mike, to give your report.
Well, very good. I can't see my camera or myself on the screen right now, so I'm not sure if you can see me. Hopefully you can hear me. Maybe just a nod of the head would be
Yeah,
great.
We can hear you. We can hear
Perfect. You. All right. Thank you. Well, thank you, Patrick, very much for that introduction. Mayor Armstrong, members of council, it's a pleasure to see you again tonight and to be here to present the results of our audit of the 2020 financial statements for the township for the year ending December 31st, 2020. I'm pleased to have a clean audit opinion to share with you again this year. Much like Patrick just mentioned, I think through our combined efforts this year, but certainly through the efforts of Patrick and his staff, we were able to have our audit, the audit back on regular schedule. And complete it all remotely this year. Patrick and his team did an excellent job of having everything ready for us, promptly providing us the information that we requested virtually as soon as we requested it. So certainly thank them for their efforts again this year, and certainly continue to say your finance team is one that many municipalities in this province would be very envious of. So you're quite fortunate to have the group that you have there. Again, this year we had minor adjustments to the financial statements as part of our audit, and generally those are adjustments are for external financial presentation purposes. So the numbers you're seeing here are the numbers you've seen throughout the course of the year, just presented in a bit of a different format. And I think that's important for you to know as a council, because it means you can be confident in the numbers that you're seeing throughout the course of the year. You're getting timely and relevant financial information on which to base your decisions. So you can be confident of that as you're going along during the year. The township, frankly, continues to be a leader in terms of financial reporting. Your staff advise on a number of different municipal accounting focus groups, and as well, there's certainly a very strong and respected voice at a number of different regional finance meetings. So I think that reflects well also. Once again, this year, you've already filed your financial information return with the province, which will ensure that you continue to receive your OMPF funding in a timely manner. And this year, you are the 6th municipality in all of Ontario to file that return. So again, a real strong reflection on the group that you have there. So turning now to the financial statements that you have before you. So in addition to management's report on the statements, we have our audit opinion, which again is a clean or unmodified audit opinion, which means that in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly the results of the operations for the township and your financial position as at December 31st, 2020. Now, as you know, the statements are presented in accordance with public sector accounting standards, which differ quite a bit from how you budget during the year. So with that in mind, I'll speak to some of the highlights of this year from 2020, if you will. Now, the first piece of information that's within the financial statements is what we call the 6-year financial review. And you've seen that before. That really is just a high-level summary of various data points for the past 6 years. So it includes things like your total revenues and expenditures, status of your tax arrears, your assessment base, number of households, number of staff, things of that nature. So that provides a pretty good high-level comparison of how things develop and evolve year over year. Now, once again, in this year, and despite having to deal with the implications of COVID-19, this was a good year overall financially for the township, and your financial position and health remains strong. You had a relatively small tax supported surplus of $847,000 this year before your capital spending. That's lower than past years, to be sure, and almost entirely due to COVID-19. Obviously lost a lot of things like user fees and things of that nature due to lockdowns and inability to rent out facilities and things of that nature. So part of the reason you were able to have a surplus was you did receive funding from senior levels of government during the year, and that was important to helping you achieve that surplus. Your cost containment measures were very good as well, but that additional funding was definitely key. So again, you've had a surplus for the last 6 years, and of course you put those funds back into the township for future growth and investment. Your taxes receivable, they did increase this year, and I think that's due to some of the hardships experienced by different ratepayers due to COVID-19. But overall, and relative to other municipalities in the region, you're still doing quite well in terms of your tax arrears. And as a percentage of your levy in general, overall is still not too far off your past history, which is pretty good considering the year we've had and the hardships some individuals have faced over the past year. Your net financial assets continue to grow. They grew by 1.97 million this year, which is very similar to last year. And they've increased $12.5 million since 2014. Your Kitchener Power Corporation investment continues to be very strong. It increased by 485,000 this year, and over the past year has provided just over $1.27 million in cash to the township by way of the dividends that you receive every year from that investment. So it continues to perform very well. You added another 3.2 million to your tangible capital assets this year, or your infrastructure, your equipment, your roads, and so on. Over the past 12 years, you've invested $54 million back into those assets. And you also continued with your asset management planning, which is important and helps you to be provided with more accurate information about the condition and lifespan and replacement costs of your assets, so you can more accurately judge when you need to plan to incur those costs and look for additional funding from senior levels of government there. And as well, you were debt-free again for the 7th consecutive year in a row, which is always a nice position to be in for sure. In terms of staffing, you increased by a net of 7 staff this year, which is actually the first significant increase you've had in the last several years. And I think what that's reflective of is the fact that you're a growing and you're a developing municipality. So not surprising to see that growth there. And I think it's also reflective of the fact that you continue to deliver your services in a responsible manner financially. So really overall, that concludes my comments on the audit for the financial statements for 2020. Certainly, again, would like to thank Patrick and Ashton, as he's on the call here, and the rest of the finance team for their efforts this year. They're a pleasure to work with for sure. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. So any comments or questions? Councillor Fenning.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. I certainly echo your sentiments about our financial team. They are a pleasure to work with, and we're very grateful for their expertise. In a year when many people have suffered devastating losses economically, I know that there are many in the community who are going to find the comments about our financial position difficult to hear. And I was hoping that maybe we could contextualize some of the information, because while, yes, you know, it is due to excellent work and I believe good decision making on the part of everyone at this table, we have forecast, the director has forecast that in a couple of years we will be in a deficit position. So while we currently, it looks on paper like we're in a good position, we know that future expenditures are coming and they are large. And so maybe if you could just either director or Mike, if you could contextualize that for us, please.
Absolutely. You're spot on with your comments, Councillor Fenning. There's no question that while you are doing well, there are costs coming down the road for sure in terms of infrastructure and things of that nature. So, and as I alluded to in my comments as well, you would have actually experienced a deficit this year had it not been for some of that funding from the senior levels of government that you did receive, and that was COVID specific funding. So if not for that, you certainly would have had a deficit this year and would have started to chip away at the base that you've built to be able to help withstand some of those future costs that you have coming down the road. One of your reserve funds is a working reserve fund, and that's listed in your financial statements as well. It's held pretty steady over the last couple of years, and it's sitting at just over $500,000. That's effectively a contingency fund, if you will, for unforeseen and unplanned expenditures. And while that's a nice amount of money to have, it's certainly not very large for a township of your size. So you can see the types of projects that you undertake, and that 500,000 often doesn't go that far when it comes to some of those projects. So certainly you're absolutely right in your comments that while it's been a tough year, you do have to plan for the future as well.
I think if I can just add, thanks, Mike, for your comments.
Yep.
If I can just add on there, Mayor Armstrong, through you to Councillor Fenning. Excellent question. Mike kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think an important piece, and I stressed it a lot this year in the financial reporting about the senior government support that we received this year. And the one part I'm really proud of, I think, of the organization council and all of our senior staff is we recognize that that's not going to continue coming forever. This was a significant event that had significant supports come in play. We've been fortunate to have them, but we're also fortunate that through a lot of the cost containment pieces that were deployed across every division, we managed to carry over some of that funding unspent to help us out this year. And as everybody knows, this year, and Sandy or Miss Jackson, sorry, would know more than anyone, the challenges on recreation are devastating, for lack of a better term, from a financial standpoint. And we're in good condition because of some of the decisions that we made. I've expressed clearly a lot of times and hope to get the message out, and I appreciate questions like this to get it out, that a surplus in operations or accounting-based surplus has to be taken with for what it is. The vast majority of our surplus that we carry is already committed to future capital, already committed to capital budgets that this council has approved to move ahead. The money just hasn't been spent. So it can be misleading somewhat. The word surplus, it is the terminology there. And then, as Mike said, we sit on a number of financial reporting groups across the province to work on terminology and understanding of financial statements for what they are, because I understand how council can be put in a precarious position to talk to community members and constituents about spending when we have a significant surplus. So thank you for letting Mike and myself to give a second to contextualize that. I think it's important for the community to understand, and we are in a good position to build on our investments, to build on our infrastructure in a growing community. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Once again, another fantastic job by the finance department, and actually every department in the township, especially in such a difficult year. And every single department would have had to make adjustments. As an example, the rec department, you open the place, you open the rec center, and then you open it minimally, you close it, you open again. Fire department, learning new protocols, Castle Kilbride, opening, closing, people working from home. So I think the township has done an amazing job, like staff, in adjusting their lifestyle and for us. So I did have one question regarding the tangible assets. So they seem to be dropping every year. Like 2015 was 146 and we're at 131. So it's basically depreciation on buildings and things like that. I guess would probably make that up. But with prices of homes and buildings and all that skyrocketing, should we also not be a little better than that? I guess would be my question.
I think I might take this one, and Mike, if you want to add in
Yep.
afterwards, but through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yeah, so what you are recognizing is that our assets, our own infrastructure is amortizing faster than we're putting money back into it. And that's what I'll say is that's the physical spend. The commitments that have been made are going to turn that in the other direction rather quickly here. We have large capital projects that are on the books that are unspent at this point in time that are going to increase that value. So you're looking at the net book value with the numbers you're speaking to. So that's all that's a reflection of, that they're amortizing quicker than what we're putting money in. But this council has been steadfast and with staff on the need for additional infrastructure investments. The infrastructure levy that was introduced a couple of years ago is going to help give us the ability to move forward on capital and infrastructure investments faster potentially than we have before. And we're going to no doubt have to have some significant ones in the coming years with the growth. But that's what you're seeing there. As far as the value, recording for PSAB under public sector accounting, those assets are put on the books the year that we acquire them at the value they are there. We don't go back and adjust them or inflate them because maybe they're worth something more later. That's kind of the way the accounting exercise works. So we'll have some old buildings in there. I hate picking on Sandy, but her picture's on the screen, so I'll stick with that. But we have a building like the Hayesville Community Center, right, is a very old building. The value to replace that building now isn't what it shows up on the books from a PSAB perspective. It's just the historical cost less amortization. So technically, from a books perspective, I'm pretty sure we got it fully amortized. The Hayesville Community Center would have a net book value of $0 right now on our books, but we know that building is worth a lot more than $0. But maybe Mike, you could just elaborate on that a bit more from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've pretty well covered it there, Patrick. You're absolutely right. And as you noted, the spending will catch up over time here, and you'll see that relationship switch between growth in the value of those assets and compared to the depreciation that's occurring. Your depreciation's actually been pretty consistent the last couple of years. So as the spending starts to occur more frequently and on larger projects, you'll see that will grow. And partly why I try to, in my highlights there, speak to what you actually invest into your capital assets, because Councillor Fisher, as you noted, if you look at that total, it looks like it's going down every year. You kind of lose track of what got added to that cost base during the year as well, which I think is important for members of the township to understand that there is investment that is occurring every year.
Thank you. Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just a quick one, and this is probably just more of a clarification as the Director of Corporate Finance, Mr. Kelly, has alluded to the infrastructure tax. Is that shown separately, or I know that we're showing it separately on our regular operational stuff, but through the audit, is that somewhere that we can sort of allude to for our residents to know about?
Sure. Through you, Mayor Armstrong, to Councillor Gordick. I guess the short answer is no, it's not separated out distinctly within the financial statements. Financial statements are governed by PSAB to be presented in a certain format. I think this municipality, we do an excellent job of presenting financial information on a quarterly basis to council and to the public to see, and during the budget process, to see it in a format that makes more sense from what you're trying to explain. So we try and drive people to look at those quarterly reports and financial statements that are more easily interpreted. As Mike said at the start, the financial statements that we present and submit to the province are in a standardized format across our entire province. And so, yeah, short answer, no, but it is included within that top line of revenues. That's just a general line of taxation. Our infrastructure levies included within that.
Thank you for that. It's just that as it being a new tax, it's just a little clarification for the residents, but I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I see no further questions. So we have a recommendation before you. That report COR 2021-17 regarding the 2021 annual financial report be received for information purposes. That is moved by Councillor Cordick, second by Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate your report. And you make these people sound really good. So,
well, they don't need my help to sound good. They do it on their own. So thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to see you all again tonight and to have a conversation with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Mike. And yes, we do appreciate our staff because we do know that they do a great job. So thank you.
They do. Yes, indeed.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good evening, everyone.
You too. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
So next is, there are no delegations. So the next item is the consent agenda. And there are 10 items on the consent agenda. Are there any items that council wishes to pull from the consent agenda? Sorry. Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. I would like to pull 11.5, please.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Hallman.
I thank you, through the mayor. I'm looking at PW 2021-09, FR 2021-03, and PFRS 2021-06.
Okay. I just have to figure out which numbers those are.
So that would be 11.2, 11.3, and 11.5.
Okay, so 11.5 has already been pulled, so 11.2 and 11.3. Okay. So those are pulled. So we'll do the recommendation that these are all messed up. So we're looking at that report, all the reports with the exception of 11.5, 11.3, and 11.2 be approved. That is moved by Councillor Hallman, Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So Councillor Gordick, we'll start with you. You have a question on 11.5.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Really, it's a really tiny one. I just, to the Director of Parks, Ms. Jackson, could you just give a little explanation of what the modernization of the elevator is in the Hamburg Community Center? It's a really funky old elevator, and I'm kind of wondering what we could have done to make it modern. So thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Through the mayor, that elevator, as you said, is quite aged, and it's required to be inspected annually by the TSSA, the Technical Standards and Safety Authority. So when they did their inspection last year, they identified some items that no longer met the code. So we flagged it last year. Conveniently, we weren't open much last year, so we had to do some improvements to the lift mechanisms and some of the mechanical pieces related to that.
So through you, Mayor, just a bit of a follow-up. Does that mean it still though has the sort of individual call? Because I know that's always been a bit of a concern, having running up and down the stairs. So that hasn't changed. It's just really more the mechanical issues to make it more safe worthy.
Yeah, through the mayor, it really is to be compliant with the code. So unfortunately, you're correct. Unless we put in, you know, a couple $100,000 new elevator system, it remains the same as a lift.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, Councillor Hallman, you have a question on the same matter, on the same report, 11.5?
Yes, thank you. And sorry for not having myself muted a moment ago until I got a message to turn my mute on. So sorry about that, everybody. Yes, so through the mayor to Ms. Jackson, can you comment on when the splash pad's going to open? You know, we have selfish reasons for that.
Through the mayor, typically we open the first part of May. So we haven't got a date yet, but
okay, waiting for the opening of, you know, the province, and then following that will be good.
Yes, that the splash pads are actually allowed to remain open, I believe. So lots of discussion at the regional level on what other municipalities in the region of Waterloo are doing. So we meet again this week, and I'm assuming we'll have some dates as to when most municipalities will be looking at getting them open. And we're at this point not looking at staffing them as we did last year. But we have some things to sort out because we want to make sure that regionally we're sort of approaching all of these amenities with the same sort of context. So stay tuned and I'll get you a date fairly soon.
Great, thank you. And then I just have one more question that I just received from a member of the public wondering about the old water fountain at Huron and Peel, if that's something that is maintained by the region or is that maintained by the township? It's an old drinking water fountain.
That is a very good question through the mayor. I don't know. I'd have to get back to you on that. I'm not really sure.
Okay, thank you. That's it for this one for me.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to approve 11.5. Moved by Councillor Gerber, second by Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And next we have 11.2. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Mr. Molyneux. Can you please comment on, through the insurance pool data that we have listed in your report, what time frame that covers?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Armstrong. The insurance claims that we would report on through that time period would have been submitted through January and March of 2021. These are, I guess, formally, just for some information, these are formally submitted through the clerk's office and eventually passed to the region-wide insurance pool. So what we're actually reporting on in this section is typically the effort involved from a staff perspective to respond and to be part of the information collection process internally. And that's just the general nature of what we would typically report on. So we don't report on too much detail more than you might see in terms of number and maybe a general nature. And that's what you would see in that section.
Okay, thank you. So if there was any resident concerns about that, we could follow up on this after?
Generally speaking, yes. If there's a resident concern with an active claim, that's something that we could certainly talk about with themselves and the representative from council if they so wish. But again, generally speaking, they are, we'll call it more or less private sort of legal process interactions. So there is a bit of a sensitivity to it that we wouldn't typically deal with through this process. And we may also be challenged to deal with it through sort of a council interaction process as well. But that being said, we can certainly talk offline about that.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that detail and clarifying that for the public.
Okay, so need a motion to have 11.2 approved. Councillor Gordick, Councillor Hallman, all in favor? That is carried. Next item is 11.3. 11.3, Councillor Hallman.
Yes, I wasn't sure if the fire chief was on there yet. Yes, thank you, through the mayor. I was excited to see the comments in there with the ongoing works with, as the trying times are through COVID, but the effort to keep the public informed about what's going on with fire services and the exciting work that that will be happening with the Baden Outlook. And it kind of poked me to remember a process that we went through as council last year, where we actively supported that we wanted to see more effort supporting journalism within the community. And it kind of left me wondering if there was an opportunity for fire services to engage some of the other newspapers that we had in the service community, New Hamburg Independent or Air News or the Wilmot Post, and see if there's some opportunities to work with educational material there, or kind of how you saw moving forward with educational material. Just wanted to kind of get a summary from that.
Go ahead, Chief.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Education has been a real challenge through the COVID period, and specifically to printed media. We've always struggled with how to address the printed media piece. We typically don't budget for that particular process. We really do rely heavily on social media. Facebook is a strong proponent for us. And of course, our website, driving people to those resources over and over again. The project we're doing with the Baden Outlook right now is a joint cooperative discussion to place that in the paper, in a local paper, so that the community could get to know some of the volunteer firefighters, which is always really good for the community to know the faces of the people that are helping them in a time of need. Unfortunately, it would be counterproductive to try and engage every newspaper or every printed media to do that at the same time. So that's something that can be shared over the years. Public education, typically done in a newspaper in that variety, you would do something like a targeted, I don't know, a coloring contest or something of that nature, where you do something really focused and targeted, and you have a specific goal and target to meet with the school. And schools are our target. We like to target that kindergarten to grade 4 range. And unfortunately, our schools have been in, for a better choice of words, chaos in the last year. Open one week, close the next. It's just an audience that we just really have no way of engaging right now. I can say that we're looking at, council approved recently the grant. We're going to be purchasing some tablets to start looking at how can we engage the faculties at the school to get to the students in the fall, maybe, and look at doing some live streaming. We're working on that right now, so we're ready for September. That's a really new, very new to us, and we certainly have a lot to learn. And we're reaching out to other departments that are doing it now, so we can try to learn and engage in what they're doing and their successes, and try not to miss any of those opportunities. And the other piece is videos. We're doing a lot of videos right now. We're very fortunate to have a member of our department that's very talented in that area. So I haven't released them yet, but there was going to be a emergency management week, which is next week, where I'm going to release 4 new videos specific to 72-hour kits and flooding in New Hamburg, and some real simple, they're very simple, just to get people thinking about it. And then we send them to the appropriate websites, such as GRCA or the provincial website for a 72-hour kit. So that's kind of our marketing strategy at this time.
Thank you, I found that really, really helpful.
Ms. Jackson, you have a follow-up to that?
The chief was too humble to say that he's starring in those videos, by the way.
Oh, now, does he have an entourage?
No, but he catches a mean roll of toilet paper in one of them.
Oh, okay. Ooh, that's a real rollout. Councillor Fisher.
Yep, through you, Mayor Armstrong, just to expand on the chief's comments, the Baden Outlook's offering complimentary space in the paper, so we're not charging for that at all. And also, I think Andrew has been doing a fairly good job of putting out news things like the time with keep kids off the ice and things like that, barbecues, how to not have fires with the barbecues and things. So I think you're doing a good job there, Chief.
Yes, they are part of the crew that does a great job. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you. Just a follow up to Councillor Fisher. Thanks for clarifying that it was a united project with the Township Fire Department in the Bay Note. Look, that's great to see that collaborative work, and I'm really excited to get to see the faces and see this going forward. It's exciting.
Very good. Seeing nothing further, so we need a motion to approve 11.3. Councillor Gordick, Councillor Hallman, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And the next item is 12.1. Information Legislative Services Combined Quarterly Activity Report. Ms. Middleholtz.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Inclusion and diversity as a divisional update has now been added to the Information and Legislative Services Quarterly Activity Report. As the Prime Minister's Path public engagement is about to begin the community outreach, representatives from the First Peoples group are in attendance this evening to discuss the engagement strategy and comment on some of the questions the public have already asked. We did receive a piece of correspondence from a member of the community that has been added to the Township website. So that information is there. It's also been circulated to Council as well as to our consultants. So I would like to ask our Zoom hosts if they could bring the First Peoples group forward. We also have members of the public who have registered as delegations this evening, who will be called upon following the delegation. So we don't need to quite add the delegations just yet. So if it's just the people from First Peoples group at this point. And I'm unsure who's going to start off. But this Melissa is going to be, Miss Hamill is going to be starting us off.
Hi there. I'll just wait for my colleagues to, oh, there we go. We got cameras on and there's 4 of us joining you this evening. Hello, Bojo, Sego, Ani, Melissa Hamill, Indigenous Cause, Ottawa, Ndojaba, Makwadodam. So my name is Melissa Hamill, and I'm calling in today from unceded Algonquin territory in Ottawa. I introduced myself in my grandmother's language of Anishinaabe-Moan. My family is from Kitigan-Zibi. My dad's a member there, but grew up in Ottawa. And our introductions always take a little bit longer. So I wanted to mention that my dad grew up in Ottawa, met my mom here. She's of Danish and English descent. They actually moved to Kitchener where they had me. So I was born in your area, born in Kitchener, where my dad started his career at the KW Record, and always proud to talk about that. That was his foray into a 30-year photojournalism career that started there locally. So I grew up here in Ottawa, but I think probably always wondered about what Kitchener was like, and ended up choosing UW as my place to go for university. So I moved there in 1999 and spent a good 10 years there, both attending University of Waterloo and getting to know all the areas around KW as well. Really, really fond memories. And one of my jobs I ended up working for the university as well was within the Indigenous Student Association, which was the Aboriginal Student Association back then, where I met and became close friends with Jean Becker, who I still consider to be my elder, and your area is where I go home for ceremony too. So I've got a big place in my heart for that whole region. My husband's from Bruce County, so we have relatives in all the way from New Hamburg up to Chesley and Tara, and we try to visit as often as we can. So my only regret in this introduction to you today is that we can't be together in person. We would have loved that. We're missing out on a lot of that lately, and we're crossing our fingers that somewhere along this process we'll be able to come and meet you all in person. It is such a pleasure to be here and to be finally putting faces to names. I know that this has been a long time coming, and that the process feels really slow at a time when the world feels like it's going really, really fast, and especially all of the different issues that intersect in the really important work that you're doing. So I'll comment on that a little bit more as we go on, but I did want to take that time for that fulsome introduction and to introduce you to the rest of our team that's here as well today. We're going to, well, after introductions, we would love the opportunity to walk you through our first take on a work plan that is yours to create with us, and an evergreen plan that we look forward to being helpers on, and to take the role of guiding and helping. So I'll pass on to Cassidy next, and then we'll go to Bob and then Guy.
Great, thank you. Tansei Kiowa, good evening, everyone. My name is Cassidy Karen. I'm Métis. My family comes from the historic Métis communities of St. Louis and Batoche, Saskatchewan, but I'm calling today from Williams Treaty Territory up in Huntsville, Ontario, which is where I now call home. I am an associate at First Peoples Group, and I've been doing work with Indigenous communities, including my own, and supporting community-based and community-driven work for nearly a decade now. And I'm currently pursuing my master's in community development. So I bring that experience to this project. I'm also very excited to be meeting face-to-face virtually with all of you, and saddened that we couldn't be in person, but have the same hope that hopefully one day we can come together and do this work in person. So thank you, and it's nice to meet all of you.
You're on mute there, Bob. Oh, there you are.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bob Watts, and really pleased to be here with all of you. I'm coming to you from Six Nations of the Grand River, just down the road from you. I'm a member of the community here, and really happy to have been part of the evolution of this work to date. By way of background, I was part of the team that negotiated the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, and then I went on to set up Canada's first Truth and Reconciliation Commission as the interim executive director. I've taught reconciliation at Queen's University for about 10 years now. And in my master's degree, I specialized in work on conflict resolution, and in particular, the role that culture plays in conflict. So I've got, I think, some really useful skills in terms of community work and community-based processes. We've been doing a lot of work through the First Peoples Group, where I am a special advisor on reconciliation. We've been doing a lot of work with municipalities on some pretty tough issues, and with some other organizations, and have some good processes and good learnings that Melissa is going to elaborate on in terms of what might be useful in terms of the work going on. in your municipality. So I'm looking forward to this journey that we're beginning on, and I'll turn things over to Guy.
Thanks, Bob. Gwingawage Piju and the Desligas Piju do Dem. That's Ojibwe for my name's through ceremony, but I'm the furthest thing from an Ojibwe. I'm probably about 3,000 miles away from Ojibwe. I come from Flin Flon, Manitoba. I know myself to be a bigger hockey fan than many of the people on this call. I was stick boy for the Flin Flon Junior Bombers when Reggie Leach and Bobby Clark were tearing up the town. And 2 years before I was born, my hometown team won the Memorial Cup, beat everybody in Canada. So if anybody can match that, we'll have to talk off camera. I look after First Peoples Group, and I'm going to have a hard time talking the way that you talk through you, to you, Mr. Mayor, because my grandfather was mayor of Flin Flon. So I'm not trying to put an age on you, Mayor Armstrong, but I'm familiar with the municipal processes. And First Peoples Group is my passion. And what we are about is a hope-based Indigenous company who's trying to build a better Canada. And we're looking forward to working with you very much. I'm going to keep my intro that short. I will add that I sit at the Museum for Human Rights on the Standing Indigenous Advisory Committee in Winnipeg, and human rights is also a passion for mine. And it's a pleasure and an honor to work with you as we address some of the touchy issues on how we can go about building a better nation for all of us. So you're in great hands with Melissa, as you heard her connections to the region, and her and Cassidy will be leading most of this work, advised from time to time with Bob and I coming in at various points in that. And then of course on call for all of you at any time you need us. So thank you through you to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Guy, but you don't have to worry about the age thing. Father Time has done that to me, so already. So
there you go.
So thanks, Guy. Just to continue on, and before I'm going to ask Cassidy to sort of walk you through the one-pager that is just a capture of the plan that we're working on in the background here. And just wanted to highlight some of our experience that you probably already have heard, in the process of getting on board. And I'm assuming it's the way that you sort of found us as well, in that we do a number of work. So first of all, as Guy mentioned, we're a circle of consultants, actually from across Canada. There's about a dozen of us, but we pull in different consultants and different experts depending on the topic that we're working on. And we work with not-for-profits. We work deeply in Indigenous communities and with Indigenous communities. We also help to coach, corporations and municipalities. And in the last, I never know whether to count 2020 or not. Is it 2 years or 3 years? We've been working with the city of Kingston and on two really important projects with them. One was called Your Stories, Our Histories. And that was their public consultation process around looking at all of the cultural and heritage sites and trying to figure out which voices are missing from the current story that's being told there, and how can those stories be rewritten to be more inclusive. One of the hot topics within that consultation, of course, was who we colloquially call SJAM, and that's what they call him in Kingston too. So Sir John A. Macdonald's, there's a statue there in Kingston, and there was a whole consultation process that included the urban Indigenous community, as well as local First Nations that are close to Kingston, on what to do with that statue, especially in this time when the topic of statues are front and center and on headlines of newspapers all around the world. Alongside that process called Your Stories, Our Histories, which I mentioned was like an all-inclusive public consultation, there was also a project called Engage for Change that happened and is still happening alongside Your Stories, Our Histories, which is a specific engagement for the urban Indigenous community in Kingston on a number of different topics, of which cultural and heritage is just one little piece of the pie. But what that allowed us to do was to really get to know the community and to run, to facilitate talking circles and to weave together those two engagements and processes so that all voices were included, in the process. And that's something that we're looking forward to doing here as well. That couldn't have been done without working really, really closely with City of Kingston staff and with the support of the mayor and council as well. And there were also other opportunities that arose for example, cultural awareness training, and what we talk about as recommendations and solutions or actions that fall into 3 different categories. We call it the 3 S's. And we have been using this framework more and more as we do this kind of work. And that is, after a process of deep listening and reflecting back and validating what community is saying as they come out to engagements or as they engage in whatever way they feel comfortable with this subject matter. What we tend to reflect back is a series of recommendations or actions that fall into 3 different categories. So symbolic, substantive, and systemic, and you can't have one without the other. So symbolic actions on their own can be seen as sort of those like checkbox, can be interpreted as checkbox actions if they don't have substantive and systemic actions to back them up. So we can talk in a lot more detail about what that looks like as we launch our process, but I just wanted to give that overview of the work we're doing with Kingston. We're now seeing sort of the fruits of our labor, and that a series of recommendations were made, and we're helping out with a couple of those recommendations as projects on their own as well. So always happy to talk about that work or to link you up with the staff there to get their guidance or community members there as well. And you can also find that work just by sort of Googling Kingston and First Peoples Group, and those reports are all public and online as well. I'd like to pass it on to Cassidy now to speak to just as I said, our first take at a plan within this process, and then I believe after that we'll go to questions.
Great, thanks, Melissa. And if somebody could help me load up the one-page document, great, thank you. Great, so what you are seeing here is a very high-level summary or a glimpse into what the engagement process will look like or can look like. In short, the main goal of the engagement is to work with and encourage dialogue amongst the residents of Wilmot to develop some recommendations that will eventually be proposed to yourselves on how to move forward with the Prime Minister's path. So through a variety of engagement methods and events, we hope to implement 4 levels of engagement that you see here. But what's really important to note here is that this is a draft process, and we've designed it so that it allows adaptability and flexibility. So each of the steps here of this process are going to be informed by the step that comes before it. So in other words, each step of this process is going to be informed by the conversations that we're having with your community, and we're going to adapt to the needs, we're going to adapt to the community's needs as we continue to move forward. So very briefly, step 1 is designed to launch and introduce the public engagement process to residents of Wilmot. So we hope to have a virtual event to support the launch, where we'll introduce the process in a little bit more detail and hopefully have this event serve as a primer for the overall process. It's also where an initial community scan process is going to begin, where we're going to be seeking to understand the various perspectives that exist within the community, the history, and how best to engage with the residents of Wilmot. So then step 2, really with the exception of projects occurring in one of our team members' own traditional territory, we consider ourselves to be visitors. And of course, Melissa has a lot of strong ties there, but none of us are actually from Wilmot. So with that, step 2 is really purposefully designed for our team to introduce ourselves to the community through a number of one-on-one conversations with key individuals, different groups, community groups, organizations in Wilmot. And this step is building upon step 1 and is also going to further support our team in understanding the best ways to engage with each of those target engagement participant groups. So then input from the community will then be gathered in step 3 through 2 main engagement methods at this point. We've planned a questionnaire, a public questionnaire, and a series of focus groups. So the public questionnaire will be comprised of various questions that are just targeted to solicit input on the issue from as many residents of Wilmot as possible, recognizing that it might go beyond the residents of Wilmot, but our priority is to hear the voices of the residents of Wilmot. So putting this out there to get that really broad feedback. So then we also will be facilitating and leading focus group sessions with various participant groups. And so those focus group audience are going to be based on the insights that we gather during step 2 of the process. And the main purpose of the focus groups will be to explore opinions, solutions, and recommendations of the local community. It's during these sessions that we can really tailor our process in ways that are respectful of the audiences that we're meeting with. And we will ensure that this process has a focus on empowerment of hard to reach and marginalized voices in the engagement process, such as those of the urban Indigenous community, as well as populations like youth and young people in your community. What do they have to say? Though we would, as we've said, prefer to host these as in-person talking circles throughout this process, COVID-19 safety protocols are going to limit us to virtual focus groups, so likely through Zoom. With that, we do recognize that that might present challenges for individuals, those without internet or sufficient bandwidth to support a video conferencing software. Or a lot of people are going through Zoom or even consultation fatigue, and we recognize that. So to mitigate these challenges, we're hoping to offer multiple means of contributing to the focus groups, such as joining over the phone, or even offering additional one-on-one conversations with members of the public who request those. So we will be seeking input from the community through our conversations in step 2 to really understand how to meet the unique needs of all of the community members in Wilmot. So that's step 3. And after that, we're going to analyze all of the community input and compile it into a draft, what we call a what we heard report, which will then circulate to all of the engagement participants, all of the residents of Wilmot, so that they can have a review of that. Following that dissemination, a public house will be held so that we can verify and expand on the findings from the initial public engagement activities, including draft recommendations that have arose through the process. So this public verification step will be facilitated by Bob, who mentioned brings years of negotiation and consensus building experience to our engagement team. At that point, step 4 really marks the conclusion of this initial phase 1, step 1 public engagement process. At that time, a final report with recommendations will be provided to yourselves, who hold the decision-making authority to implement or not the various community developed recommendations that arise through this process. So that very briefly is an explanation of this document that I believe you all have, and we are open to questions.
Okay, council have any questions? Councillor Hallman?
Thank you, through the mayor. I have a list. Do you want me to go through my list or shall I take turns? I'm just trying to figure out what you prefer to be the best, Mayor.
You might as well start and go through your list.
Okay, thank you. So first, I need to thank Melissa for announcing your pronouns. I really appreciate that. So thank you for doing that. It's great to see all your faces. And I have to say that I've been following you for a while, Mr. Watts. It's really great to have you part of this group. I'm really excited about this process to navigate reconciliation with you for what it will look like in Wilmot going forward. This was my original motion, so this is something that's near and dear to me. And so for something that was important to me within the motion as well was for transparency. So that's why I'm sorry about the time that I'll take to ask some questions, but it's important to me that that I ask them in this way. So I hope you can be patient with me and while I navigate through some of my questions as respectfully as possible. My first question is, with Wilmot Township being situated on the traditional land with the Mississaugas of the Credit, I just wanted to know if you'll be reaching out to them to make sure that they are engaged in this process as we are on their traditional land.
I can address that one, Councillor Hallman. Much like the answer is yes, and much like it was within Kingston when we first arrived in Kingston, there really was very little outreach to the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte or the Alderville First Nation. And we've moved from that to bilateral agreement and friendship agreements between not only the mayor with both chiefs, but also with councillors that were appointed to be, if you will, ambassadors to that other nation. And so that's maybe something internally that we can put forward to you, is if the mayor or council wants to appoint someone from your council to be, if you will, some sort of a equivalent political envoy to the Mississaugas.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
Mm.
My next question is, can you tell me about the survey process, what that looks like? I'm just curious about what that, just kind of putting some words to that.
And I'll turn that over to Cassidy, and maybe we can send an example of that as well to you through your administration.
Yeah, definitely. So at this point, the survey isn't developed. We need to ensure that we're asking the right questions, and that will be informed through step 1 and step 2. As we said, to have those conversations. We did have a conversation with the working group from your township on all of the different ways that we can ensure that the survey gets published. So whether it be online, whether it be you can print it out. I believe there is a return slot at the town hall for surveys. So we've looked into all of the different ways that we can make sure that the survey is as accessible as possible. But we can get more details to that as we go along in the process.
Yeah, thanks, Cassidy.
Thank you. You mentioned that working with key individuals with a focus of marginalization, which was in the motion that was passed on council. Can you tell me what you've heard so far about how that will be organized? Like, how will do you need connections to be made with those key individuals within the community? And has staff provided you any details on that to date?
Yeah, it's a great question, but we would count on any information that anybody from council can send to us. We are outsiders to your community. We don't know it the way you do. And just as it was helpful from our work in Kingston or in Sudbury, it's good for you if you have some connections to, and if we have your trust, that you can pass them on to us, and we can ensure that all elements of that. We had a particular focus on that with some of the work we're doing in Sudbury for the new art gallery and the library, to ensure that people who might be deaf, people who have speech disabilities, and as Cassidy said, some people just don't have access to printers, and we would hope that even you could pick up a questionnaire at the township office in some way, shape, or form. So whatever you can give us, and that's part of our information gathering work that we do before we start any engagement process.
Okay, thank you. So during the process we've walked through in Wilmot over the last just over a year now, there has been some people in our community who have been racially profiled and feel very uncomfortable engaging with us as politicians, but are interested in engaging with you without us involved. And many of them are Indigenous. So what is the safest way to connect those people without us involved to you? Is there going to be communication put out directly through your communication outlets that they can reach out to you directly to eliminate the township aspect of the trauma that they feel is connected to us?
Yes, I can answer that one. Yes,
Okay.
The short answer is yes. And we're also going to be available throughout our time on this contract. If anyone wants to ever reach out one-on-one and just have a conversation with us, we're here for that. To go back to your question on how we sort of, collect or mine that contact information, one of our first steps is actually an invitation to each of you as counselors to have one-on-one conversations. And then from there, reaching out to those identified key people and broadening the reach that way. But we will make public our contact information and a way for not only an anonymous survey, but for conversations to be had either over the phone or by email, whatever people are comfortable with.
Yeah, and we don't attribute remarks in the report. Nothing will be attributed with a name. The only time that comes up is, it's happening now in Kingston, is that when people volunteer to become members of a working group to draft some of the language, then their names are on that working group. So I can probably say we're ready to go from 7 in the morning until about 7 o'clock at night. So some people who are getting up early, like Cassidy in our group, is probably up the earliest, and she's also to bed the earliest. So you might be talking to someone like me at night, but someone like her in the morning. So we'll try to keep it open for, as Melissa said, Zoom fatigue, or people who are just happier to use the phone than to go online or to try and fill out a questionnaire. We'll do whatever we can to make sure that people have a safe space. And that's one of the things that Melissa is uber talented at, is to ensure that there is a safe space for all the work that we do, because as Bob mentioned, these are some pretty touchy issues sometimes. And it's important for every citizen to be made to feel safe.
Thank you for that. One of my next questions will actually, I need to speak to my fellow counselors as well. One of my main concerns from the process in 2016 was how I saw the lack of transparency that occurred, which arrived us to the decisions that we're making today. And so in the act of transparency, I'm asking that we will have minutes published and we will have agendas published when any members of the First Peoples Group are meeting with staff and members of council. And additionally, I'm asking that the council members that were appointed to this remain in part of this active discussion group. So I'm asking for my fellow councilor support of, I will summarize again, that there'll be agendas, minutes, and that Councillor Fenning and Councillor Fisher will be attending these meetings. Okay. Mayor, can you ask, can I ask for a point of order on that?
Well, it'll be up to council if they want to discuss that process.
And just a quick direction of staff through you, Mayor Armstrong.
Yes.
And maybe a comment from First Peoples Group on making sure that can work. Because I think, yeah, I support that.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, that way I believe the spirit of Councillor Hellman's original motion was understood, I think, by all of council, for Councillor Fanning and Councillor Fisher to be part of the original group. Through whatever changes, that motion was changed, and them being on just the selection committee was not, I believe, what the spirit of the original motion was, nor did we understand it to be that way. So I fully support Councillor Hellman's ask for direction to staff to have Councillor Fanning and Councillor Fisher both attend meetings and to have agenda minutes posted for open and transparency with this process.
And from First Peoples Group perspective, we are at your service. So, we have, and we're very careful about how we conduct our meetings, and we would assist in any way, shape, or form to facilitate what you need done on your end. But that's an internal. I think this is internal to you to decide.
Councillor Fisher, you want to comment?
Yep. Thanks, through you, Mayor. So how does First People Group feel about that? Like, I don't have a problem with that. Do you find that productive?
Well, I personally, we operate on the basis of no blame, no shame, and we say try not to name people in ways that are not respectful. So I'm not understanding the question. I suppose we're in favor of full transparency for anything that we say or do. I don't know, Bob, do you have anything else to add to that?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I think that, there could be activities that happen on a number of levels. One that is sort of the business of the work that we're doing, and making sure that that business part of the work is done in full transparency with staff and with the council committee present. And then there's the part of the work that may be interviews with individuals on council, on staff, and with the public. And the expectation is that would be subject to the publication of minutes. That may inhibit people from participating. So I just wanted some clarity in terms of what the expectation was, Councillor.
Thank you for that clarification, because I absolutely want to respect the privacy of people engaging fully and transparently. I noticed that you had agenda and minutes published with Kingston that were just a general summary of overarching things. I think that was acceptable, transparent, and just kind of kept the pulse going of people knowing that there was actionable items happening. And yeah, that was completely, I found that to be, kept people protected, their concerns protected in the trust of you, but also kept that transparency piece of people knowing when those meetings were happening, and that was moving forward. So if it were to follow that similar path, I would think that would suffice all of that.
Councillor Fanning, you wanted to comment?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. And I'll start by saying I'm very happy to also meet all of you, even though it is virtually, to see your faces and get to hear your voices. It is a real shame that we aren't able to be in person together. But grateful for the technology that allows us this. I'm very happy to engage in the way that Councillor Hallman has described, as long as it is a help to the process and not a hindrance. What we're engaged in here is of far greater importance than any one of us sitting here. And, we're trying to, I don't need to tell any of you, but for everyone watching, I know that we are trying to address something that goes back a very long way. It is a very deep hurt that has taken many generations to come to this point. And it's going to take us a long time, and probably a lot longer than this consultation. And so for me, my view of myself in this process is as a tool, as the elected representative of this community for all the residents of it, of all walks of life and of all nations. And I want to do whatever I can to help heal and bring people together. So I'm very happy and would love to participate in meetings, as you called out, Mr. Watts, specifically procedural work meetings, not, obviously the concerns from many residents about privacy and about confidentiality are absolutely warranted and respected. But there have been a lot of questions and a lot of fear because people want to know how this process is progressing and how it's proceeding and what is going to happen. And so there has been a request for more information. And that's where this is coming from and why I'm happy to participate. So put me to work.
So I see that there is a consensus amongst all of council to proceed with that, with Councillor Hallman's suggestion. And everybody, I'm getting lots of head nods. So yeah, that'll be part of it. Councillor Gordick, you wish to speak, or you just voting happily? You just vote. Okay, good. Good. All right. So there we have you have your direction, and you have two council members who are going to be of assistance to you, and we won't invoice you for their assistance. So, Councillor Hallman, you have more questions?
I do. Within my motion, from the learning that I've been doing and working with the Indigenous community, included in the thrust of my motion was that honorariums be included to the local Indigenous people who participate in this process. Because it was in the motion, I'm just looking for clarity if this is through the First Peoples group or if this is something that council has to deal with on a separate level. So I'm not sure if this is, I see the Director of Corporate Services has hopped on, so I'm just not sure what that looks like, but I just want to make sure that that's clear for people who are watching who are Indigenous in this community.
I'll let Guy speak to that.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
when we work with community that we either we're from ourselves, we seek to identify someone from that community who will be there present as an elder. When that happens, we do suggest to our clients that honorarium be paid for that individual, not for everybody who comes forward, but from someone who provides and has the consent, I would say, of the entire community and perhaps the First Nation that they come from to be named as that elder or that ceremonial person. Now that's something that we would work with you to seek to identify those individuals. And it's just how our practice is here in Ottawa. Just prior to this call, we work with an elder from the Kitigan-Zibi First Nation on a lot of our engagement sessions where that's requested for territorial acknowledgements that would come from the actual person whose territory we're on, in this case, unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory. But anybody other than this elder would not be receiving honorarium for the work that we're doing.
Thank you for clarifying.
Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, just to add on to that, through you, Mayor Armstrong, to Councillor Hallman, from a township perspective, we would be following the guidance from First Peoples Group, and it's not the honorarium piece is not strictly to do with compensation, but also with protocols. That's the viewpoint we take from a staff perspective, and we'll rely on the consulting expertise and historical expertise from First Peoples Group to make sure the honorarium, both in terms of compensation and protocols, is followed based on their advice.
Do you want to comment, Guy, or are you waiting for the next question?
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I talk a lot. I think I will only say that last point that Patrick made is how we like to respect our practice. And I would say the biggest protocol violation in Indigenous country is to come in like you own the place and it's your place. That's probably why we're talking tonight, for example. And so let's just leave it at that.
Very good. Carry on, Councillor Hallman.
Thank you. My next question is to this process, because I haven't been informed about how you received the historical data to date and what you've been provided.
It's a good question. I'm going to defer to my experience at the City of Kingston, and I will begin at the end. They are very happy with our work, not just the City of Kingston, but the people of Kingston, as well as the residents of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. and Alderville First Nation, and I knew zero about the city of Kingston 3 years ago. Maybe less than zero. I didn't even know they had a hockey team. But then I learned that they had the Frontenacs because the mayor was happy to wear that jersey. But as you heard, Melissa, our team has excellent relations from the area. Pretty well plugged in. Bob's just down the road. Cassidy's probably a couple hours away. And we do know quite a bit about what the issues have been arising because of our earlier conversations and assistance that we made at the request of the region of Kitchener-Waterloo on some of the other issues that were pressing about a year ago. So we're no stranger to this kind of work, Councillor Holman, but we like to operate on the basis of the community will inform us, and the history and the record that we will study is a part of the information gathering exercise that we're going to do before we move forward in any way with you and your colleagues.
Thank you. That was really helpful. So I'm getting to the end of my questions, which I know you're all going to smile about because I'm that one. One of my questions was about with the next action items when it comes to the final recommendations that you make. I'm just curious within Kingston, with recommendations, did it come from weighing the marginalized people with the settlers with how you make recommendations, or how does that look? What does that look like?
That's a great question. You know, whenever anybody, including media, asked us what we thought, we really said, well, it really wasn't what we thought, it's what your citizens said. And once you have that, then you have something that you can report on and something that you can put forward to you as council and mayor for recommendations. And as Cassidy said, it's not about how a question is weighted per se, but how much respect we can give to the person who has an opinion to ensure that they're doing that in a safe space. Someone else may want to help us on this one in answering that question, but we don't. I don't know if I've ever proceeded on the basis of weighting something that way. Maybe I shouldn't speak for all of us, but most of us on this call from First Peoples Group come from backgrounds that have experienced some of the troubles and difficulties as being Indigenous people, that has brought us to this point of working in a way to make it better for other Indigenous people that are maybe less fortunate than we've become. And you know, this I'm speaking as a person who's descended from the historic Métis and Red River back to 1812, with a mother who couldn't drink at the same water fountains as her friends because they said that she wasn't allowed to. And so we know what pain feels like, and we know what pain feels like from people who come from just remote northern communities who maybe aren't Indigenous but are also suffering from a lack of employment or not being able to be heard. So that's why we go to any length from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to make it a comfortable space and a safe space for people. And we want them to know that regardless of who they are, their opinion is as good as everybody else's opinion. And it's how we work together to formulate a positive path forward is what will matter. It's too early to tell you what that's going to look like, Councillor, but we're a hopeful company. And I think we're also a hopeful country. And you certainly sound like a hopeful council. And so I can only ask that the residents who are listening trust us the way that we would trust them to give us the information that we're going to need to help formulate a way forward for you.
And my next question is, so within my motion as well, it discussed the other marginalized communities that were harmed by Sir John A. Macdonald, such as the Chinese Canadian community. Do you have any connections to the Chinese Canadian community, or do you need those provided to you?
Those would be helpful.
Okay. Okay, so I hog the floor, so I'm going to take my hand down and put myself on mic and let my other counselors engage with you. So thank you so much. I appreciate all of you and all of your time, and I'm really looking forward to navigating reconciliation in Wilmot together.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Hallman. Councillor Gordick, you've had your hand up for quite a while, so you can go ahead, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. So I think Councillor Hallman did allude to it. I just, I guess my question I have, and maybe it's too soon, is partly to do with that, the engagement with the Indigenous community. As we will know, the numbers aren't going to be as high as other individuals within the community. So I'm curious, I'm cautious of the fact that our particular statue is located in a different place than the one in Kingston. Kingston is a park. People can choose to go to a park. Our particular PM path, even just by its name alone, is on municipal property where the avoidance isn't quite so easily to do as a public park. So the engagement process for the Indigenous community, I'm concerned about, as the numbers may not be there, or the fear, because some of them were traumatized last summer over the discussions we've already had. The other point as well is going forward, what other potential statutes could be coming that can continue to add to that increase of trauma. Sir John A is just the first of others where there's going to be some concerns. And I'm just wondering how we give weight, as I know that you said you don't really have a way of weighting those answers, but that is a big concern for me, is to make sure that we do value those opinions of the Indigenous community with Sir John A, as well as upcoming potential further statutes.
Yeah, so I mean, this is going to sound counterintuitive to myself as someone who, although I like numbers, I know that there's 1.7 million Indigenous people in this country and about 38 million Canadians, and I've never felt once any less or outweighed by any of my fellow Canadians. We wouldn't be talking tonight if you didn't believe in reconciliation, and it will take some time. But I think we're at about 70 or 80% of Canadians who believe in a better way forward by ensuring that Indigenous people, regardless of how low the numbers of our people are, about 1 million First Nations, about 600,000 Métis and 65,000 Inuit, how will we ever have the same voice as 38 million Canadians? And so that's how we sort of work. We're the same as everybody, and we want the same. And I think everybody in Canada will not quibble with Canadians expecting Indigenous people to want the same roads, the same housing, the same education, the same healthcare, the same everything. And that's the beauty of being a Canadian. Who wants to argue with that one? And so we are very cautious, though, Councillor, that some people may feel that way. And one of the questions that I was interviewed about a year ago by something like an As It Happens version of CBC. And the person mentioned how that Indigenous person said she felt when she walked by the statue of Sir John A in Kingston, and how little she felt, perhaps. And so our job is going to build up the Indigenous culture around that statue, so that when she further down the road comes back there with her children or grandchildren, she's able to see a more complete story that shows the Indigenous presence that really has been left out for most of us on this call who learned the same history in the same books and in the same schools. And as Bob eloquently says in all of his work, the work that we do from First Peoples Group and from Reconciliation is framed in a no blame, no shame, and really a no naming process, so that we can get on with the job of making everybody in your township and in Kingston and in Winnipeg, feel like their lives matter and they mean something to all of us.
Thank you. Councillor Gerber.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I just want to echo some of the comments from that you've already heard. First of all, just how much we appreciate you taking the time and coming to meet us tonight. It is so great to put names to faces and understand the depth and breadth of your experience in what you're going to, and your perspective on being here to help us and guide us through to the reconciliation that we seek. Guy, I appreciated you mentioning I'm a Flyers fan from way back. As soon as you said Flin Flon, my first question was going to be, a Bobby Clark, Reggie Leach kind of question, and you just sort of hit that one right out of the park right off the bat. So an amazing story. The Flin Flon Bombers from back in the day, and they both went on to play for the Flyers, win a couple Stanley Cups. Was sort of cool too. They didn't always play in a way that promoted reconciliation, however, but they did win some Stanley Cups. So thanks to each of you for sharing just a little bit more about who you are, what makes you tick, and why you're sort of happy and excited to be able to come alongside us at this time. A number of the questions or things that I was, that I intended to talk about have been talked about. I appreciate Councillor Hallman sort of going through the intention of what we set out to establish in July, and sort of talking about, hey, is everything that's been shared going to be passed along? What are the best practices as far as where is it appropriate to have councillors involved, and how to make that transparent and accountable? And I appreciate that you have models and experience to help us do all that. Certainly heard from residents about, we don't want to do any further harm. We want to make sure that Indigenous voices are centered, and obviously this is your heart as well. So we appreciate that so much. And I appreciate I just want to comment your framework of symbolic, substantive, and systemic, because certainly we know where we are at this stage of history in our township. And while symbolic and substantive is good, we do know that we do need to aim for and hit that systemic change. And knowing that you're here to help us with that is great. And then I guess maybe just the last thing that I'll comment on is we do have some delegations here tonight, and I'm not sure, is it the plan for you to be around, and if there are questions from the delegations for you to be able to help answer those as well, or just a sort of procedure question, I guess.
We're happy to stay on. Yeah, no problem.
And then I see Bob has his hand
up.
Yeah,
sorry about that, Bob.
Yes, I was going to go to Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been thinking about this question that's come up a couple times about sort of weighting answers from different people or different groups. And, I think one of the things that we're talking about in terms of our approach from bringing a reconciliation lens to bear on this work, and a lens of inclusivity, equity, and diversity, is ensuring that voices get counted that are often discounted. And I think that's at least as meaningful as figuring out if there's an algorithm to have one voice count more than the other. Far too often those voices don't get counted at all. And so one of the things that we intend to do and will do is to ensure that create a safe place for voices to be counted. And one of the principles that we use in terms of group work is this idea that it's not so much like win-lose types of things, but what's a greater victory is exposing each other to each other's dignity, and finding dignity as a way of creating different relationships with each other and different relationships in a community. So that question of personal dignity and group dignity will be driving a lot of our work, and will be a principle base for dialogue and collaboration.
Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. I'd have to say I'm very excited to have your group working with us. A very qualified group by the sounds of it, and I'm happy to be working along with you whatever way I can. Just for the viewing audience, could you give a little capsule of some of the work you've done in the past, like what cities or your accomplishments?
Yeah, well, many years ago, I'm going to say probably about 7 or 8 years ago now, Bob led the reconciliation work for the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies on a historic apology they made to the First Nations of Ontario for the role of the Children's Aid Societies in the residential school legacy, as well as the 60s Scoop legacy. That was, as some of you may know, there are more kids in care and custody now in Children's Aid Societies than in anywhere near the residential school work. Sometimes the work that we do is related to culture. We were very grateful to be working with the Siksika First Nation in Alberta on the development of a childcare policy that was in the Siksika language first through an engagement process, and then that was translated into English for some of the new people who were born and are just learning their language. It ranges from work that we have done on you've heard about the City of Kingston work as well. And then we do a lot of reconciliation-based training work. We trained, I'm going to say about 2,000 Canadian Pacific rail workers at the request of their vice president on a call to action for the TRC. So that the trains that go from Montreal to Vancouver run through about 110 First Nations and Métis communities. And they determined that their workers, should anything be said that is untowards for the First Nations or Métis communities, they wouldn't look at it and say that Councillor Fisher said this and this. They would say CP Rail workers are disrespectful. So some of our work is in that vein. A lot of our other work is to talk with the Government of Canada employees as they're working on some of their policies to develop certain frameworks on how come the British Columbia coastal fisheries and engagement with Indigenous peoples is very friendly and family oriented and cooperative versus the one in the East Coast that you may have seen emerging tends to be a bit more militant. And sometimes our work is just bringing together people to talk about some great issues on natural resources and environment and climate change. And we sort of really have those three areas, Councillor Fisher. We have a reconciliation area, a training area, and an engagement area. So we all of our examples of engagement are pretty much how we can understand better people and understand what they mean and what they say when they say it and give them that space to do it. We work also with natural resources on some of the harvesting practices around the Powley Act, or Stephen Powley, if you are familiar with some of that legislation, on ensuring that Aboriginal harvesting rights are respected within conservation boundaries as well. And then we work and engage with the three national leaders at the Assembly of First Nations, the Métis National Council, and the Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami to ensure that anything that we're working on that has an impact on their work, that we use, have a venue to inform them of that so they don't read about it in the paper and are informed on a nation-to-nation approach that Canada is pursuing. So there's a long list. I don't know what my favorite piece of work would be. I always go back to a little, she might have been 5 years old, coloring at the same table with her when we were helping develop the Aboriginal Head Start program. And she was telling me that I'm rubbing your boot, and I said, I can feel that. We're coloring at these little tables, and she said, so when you go out today, your feet are going to be toasty warm. And that memory has stuck with me, and we're engaged in helping the Métis National Council on their 10-year childcare agreement with Canada, so that we can get young people that head start that they wouldn't have otherwise had as Indigenous people who live in some remote communities, so that they in turn can go to colleges and universities and become great members of their own societies and of Canadian society. So we're just, I think the person who probably put it best in her bio when she joined the company is Cassidy, and she's the youngest on this call from our team. In her bio, I think it's the second paragraph, first sentence said, Cassidy is a nation builder. And I don't know what you're doing at 29, but I don't know if you're thinking about that. But that's how we think. I hope that helps.
I think Councillor Fisher nodded acknowledgement that it does, that a little more understanding. That's great. Okay, no more questions. Then we'll go to the delegations. The first delegation is Mr. Nigel Gordick. Welcome, Nigel.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Good evening. It's been a tumultuous few days, with the reports of several posters promoting White Lives Matter, a parade going up in New Hamburg and Wellesley. Police are investigating, and Wilmot Council felt compelled to issue a statement condemning white supremacy and racial hate. Regardless of the opinion piece in the Record last week that sought to diminish the harm caused by the posters, an article that was so egregious it cost them my subscription, this was not an isolated incident. I've been told by several people that racism in Wilmot is a hidden secret. It is not. Former Waterloo Oxford student Brian Peralta, who is black, said he eventually became desensitized after being called the N-word so many times at school. Mr. Peralta is not the first black student to be targeted like this, and he wasn't the last. I have friends who are only a few years younger than me who attended WO, and they say racism was commonplace back then. How and why has this been allowed to continue unchallenged by the school for decades? Our granddaughter used to take the school bus to WO before COVID. When it passed Fennings Farm, she would often hear racist comments directed at the workers in the field, many of whom are Jamaican. A few years ago, when a group of these Jamaican workers visited Wilmot's Canada Day celebrations, someone warned the organizers about, quote, a suspicious group of men. Excuse me. Recently, a mixed-race couple had back-to-back medical appointments in New Hamburg. The wife, who is white, went in first, and her husband, who is black, waited in their car and closed his eyes. While he was napping, someone called the police to report a man acting suspiciously. Sleeping while black is considered suspicious. An Indigenous woman was wandering around a New Hamburg store, looking at the merchandise. A worker in the store walked closely behind her, watching and following her. After finally having enough, the woman turned and assured him, I'm not going to steal anything. A gay couple held hands as they were walking in New Hamburg. One of them is Mexican, and the couple had racist and homophobic slurs yelled at them several times by passing drivers. During the summer of 2020, posters promoting the anti-immigrant Proud Boys were put up in New Hamburg and Baden. The Proud Boys were recently designated a terrorist group by the federal government. In late June 2020, a group of the white supremacist urban infidels gathered by the S-Jam statue in Baden. One of the men who came has a conviction of assault with a weapon. The group shouted racist slurs at locals. In July 2020, a swastika and Confederate flag graffiti was painted in Sir Adam Beck Park. Earlier this year, a woman in Baden, who is married to a person of color, posted the following on Facebook. When my kindergartner comes home from school and tells me a kid in his class told him they couldn't be friends because their skins don't match, we have a problem. Kids aren't born like that, they're taught. Waterloo Region Record journalist Anam Latif tweeted the following story this morning. As a 19-year-old Laurier student, I went to a Halloween party in New Hamburg and had to face someone dressed as a Muslim terrorist. I didn't know him, he was a friend of a friend. I was the only person of color at the party. His face and hands were painted brown. He wore army fatigues, a head wrap, and had fake bombs strapped to his chest. I was in shock when I saw him, but I didn't say anything out of fear of making a scene. This is common for most persons of color when we're the only ones in the room. Thankfully, my friend went up to this man and said, your costume is offensive, go home and change, then apologize to Anam. The man went home and changed. He washed the paint off his hands and face. He profusely apologized to me, then he said, we don't see a lot of people like you around here. This is why representation matters. This is why speaking out against racism matters, especially in small town Ontario. The point is not that he was called out and apologized. The point is that he felt comfortable enough to wear an offensive costume in the first place. In December, media reports of a Wilmot Council meeting at which I appeared as a delegation quoted my comments about racism and described me as a person of color. Subsequently, I received a racist email from someone who questioned what I had done for Canada and told me to go back to where I came from. This email also attacked my wife, Councillor Gordyke, who has spoken out against racism. The sender of that email didn't hide his identity, so it was simple for the police to track him down and warn him about his future conduct. He was easy to find on social media too. His Instagram account shows photos of him wearing a Kitchener Rangers jersey at the Auditorium. The Auditorium where my family and I have also attended Rangers games. I'm sure you've all been there too. But unlike you, I can never return. Now that I've reported the racist to the police, how can I possibly go to the same venue as him and feel safe? Do any of you know how that feels? Have any of you ever had to consider how safe you are in our community because of the color of your skin? The Auditorium is no longer a safe place for me because I spoke out about racist activity in our township. When kids in Wilmot are raised to think that it's acceptable to use the N-word to describe black people, is this a safe space for people who aren't white? When white supremacists with a reputation for violence gather on township property, intimidate Indigenous people by shouting slurs at them, and council fails to condemn their behavior, what message are you sending about who can feel safe here? After Councillor Gordyke discussed White Lives Matter posters last week, there were people who said that White Lives Matter is no different than saying that Black Lives Matter. Here's the difference. If you look at WM marches, all of the participants are white. Their movement is about protecting their power. The phrase White Lives Matter in this context is used to mean that only white lives matter and that they're the most important. BLM, on the other hand, acknowledges that Black lives aren't treated as equal to white lives and that they matter too. The BLM event in Kitchener last year was attended by Black, Indigenous, and people of colour, and yes, many white people too, reflecting the diversity of Canada. Which brings me to the Anti-Racism, Inclusion and Diversity Advisory Committee. I was genuinely pleased when Councillor Gerber suggested this a few months ago, but I do have misgivings. The Inclusion and Diversity Report refers to, quote, draft terms of reference prepared and circulated to the senior management team for review and comment. I'm concerned that this committee is creating a space for white people to listen to Indigenous, Black and racialized people reliving and sharing their personal trauma, but it won't have a clear mandate nor any authority to affect change. When I look at the power structure in Wilmot, I see our MP is white, our MPP is white, every single member of regional and township council is white, our chief of police is white. Inevitably, every one of these people experiences life from a white perspective. I was born in England and lived there for 40 years, and I've lived in Canada for the past 15. I've spent my entire life in a white world. Believe me, I get it. I'm not suggesting council or staff are racist, but you see and experience the world differently than I do. So how will this committee ensure and demonstrate that it isn't simply a way to check the inclusivity box on a checklist? What is its end goal? Who was responsible for drafting the terms of reference and what relevant life experience did they call upon for guidance? And those questions aren't meant rhetorically. I don't expect the township to be able to put an end to racism in Wilmot, but you do have an important role to play. I hope that what I've said today makes you feel uncomfortable. I hope the description of acts of local racism left you nauseated and that the sight of those White Lives Matter posters gave you a pain in your chest as if your ribcage was about to crack, because that's exactly how I felt for the past week. If you experience the same thing, then I'll know you've listened and you've understood, and that would be a good place to start. That was all I had planned to say until this afternoon when the township published combined delegation presentations that included a letter from a Wilmot resident. The letter contained the following false claim referring to Mayor Armstrong's White Lives Matter incident. It says, again and again, Nigel and one or two others have asked for an apology from the mayor. The character characterizes this as part of a repeated attack. The problem is, I have never requested an apology from the mayor. I've appeared twice before Township Council to address the video incident, so council and clerk know what I said. I told the clerk that this letter was a personal attack against me, a member of the public, and that it contained information that was untrue, even though she already knew this. After several emails from me demanding the deletion of the letter, I received a terse message saying that it would be removed from the township's website. This was done at the letter writer's request, not because the township thought it was the right thing to do. Wilmot already had a tough task ahead of it, several tough tasks, and it was further damaged its credibility today at a time when it claims it wants to encourage Indigenous, Black, and people of colour like me to step forward and participate in its Anti-Racism, Inclusion and Diversity Advisory Committee. That's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Any questions of the delegation? Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Through you to Mr. Gordyke. Mr. Gordyke, I just want to thank you for taking the time and for the courage that it takes to share some of your own personal experiences and those of others that you've cataloged this evening. Those incidents should give and do certainly give all of us around the horseshoe and should give all of us around the township pause to examine closely the environment that other people in Wilmot, other than who self-identify the way we do, live their daily lives. So I appreciate you sharing that. And certainly I'm going to comment a little bit more on the Anti-Racism, Inclusion and Diversity Advisory Committee. I appreciated your questions. In suggesting the idea, the goal is to get to that systemic change, that where the voices are at the table as decisions are being made, before decisions are being made, not just to be, we heard that SSS sort of paradigm from Melissa this evening. but it is an opportunity, as you mentioned. You highlighted the whiteness of all the systems of power in the township. So the idea is how is there a vehicle to get some other voices, not just heard, but also at the table and involved in things sooner in the process, rather than just commenting or after the fact. So that's the goal. And obviously, as we develop the committee, it'll be a work in progress. And as you mentioned, it's a lofty goal, but an important goal. And hopefully, yourself and others will help us shape that committee to the point where it has more than just symbolic value, but real systemic importance. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Councillor Gerber. Councillor Fanning.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I wasn't going to comment, but I feel compelled. Nigel, I thank you for your courage. Like Councillor Gerber said, it takes an incredible amount of courage to speak up the way you have. And since you mentioned the workers on my farm, I apologize, this is very emotional for me. They are not here currently to speak for themselves, and they frequently will not speak for themselves. Last week, when I saw the posters, I was filled with fear for them. And as a counselor, I am very public. All of you out there watching today, you know my face, you know my name, you know where I live, you know where I work, you know how to reach me. And I want to appeal to all of you to understand the fear that is for me when I see this hate go unchecked in our home, in our community that I love, and that I know to be a place that can be incredibly loving and supportive and caring and welcoming. But to know that that is also a place where such heinous hate can reside. I'm appealing to all of you to stand with me so that I don't have to be afraid that these men that I love like brothers, who have shared my farm and shared my life, whose children I have watched grow up, I don't want them to be subjected to another act of racism. And the ones that Nigel mentioned tonight are a drop in the bucket. I could talk for hours about what they have experienced. And so I'm asking all of you to stand with me, to protect people who cannot speak for themselves, who are made vulnerable. They are not vulnerable by nature, but they are made vulnerable by the system that we all live in. Thank you again, Nigel.
Thank you, Councillor Fanning. Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I'm not sure if this is the right place because we had deferred the bylaws, but this is just a suggestion. So perhaps maybe a direction to staff or something for us to look at with regards to upcoming committees is perhaps maybe we open our committees to have a permanent seat without having to be vetted through the usual processes of including a IBPOC person, so that we can ensure that at least one member of our community, if they're wanting to, that an open seat will always be available to them without having to be vetted, going through the checkbox, however the system works for those that keep it anonymous. Again, not quite sure if that is a bylaw that we need to change and that we can do that at the next meeting, or if that is something that is a simple going forward, our committee. So I'm just putting that out there as a possible suggestion for going forward, especially with this upcoming diversity committee.
Ms. Meadowholt.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. So one of the items on the Information and Legislative Services work program for this year includes a template for terms of reference. So terms of reference, which are approved by council, are the ones who establish makeup of the committee. So that is something that can be built into the terms of reference. This is I believe, unless council directs otherwise, at this point in time, this would take effect for the appointments that are going to take place following the 2022 election. So unless council wants this to be effective immediately, which would require a different sort of an actual resolution to amend terms of reference sort of across the board, that would be how that would play out. So that is up to council's direction as to how they want that to.
Through you, Mayor, back to Ms. Middleholtz. Yes, I think if nothing else, because I don't believe them unless something specific changes before the next election, I think this will probably be one of our last committees. So if nothing else, at least for this immediate committee, I believe we need to have a seat set aside for anybody within, or maybe just one. I'm not saying we have to have a representation from the entire IBPOC community, but if there are even two, where they do not have to have an anonymous admission, I believe that we should have a seat. And in this particular instance, I believe that we should make it an immediate for this particular committee for obvious reasons.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. So with the Inclusion and Diversity Committee, what at this point in time, so the vetting process is not over. The terms of reference are still needing to be reviewed by other groups, but there would be a self-identification as to whether or not you are within the Indigenous Black people of color community. And I because the appointments are made by council, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think it was sort of, maybe I made an assumption that it would be all. I assumed it would be all. and my apologies if that seems a bit glib. That wasn't my intention, but
that would be fantastic.
I assumed that the people who would make their application to be on this committee would fit within that. It was an assumption.
That I believe that was stated. Or
okay.
If I've neglected to state that, I certainly intended to. That is the entire idea. So thank you for noting.
Okay, so certainly when the terms of reference are finalized, that can be built into it, but explicitly stated.
Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. To follow Councillor Gordick, I think we've all agreed tonight that we want substantive change in Wilmot, and we need to create space for the IBPOC community. That does not say that when you have a door open that, we're going to say, okay, in 2 years, if you're a person of color, come on in. No, we need to actively say today that we're encouraging all of council to that if someone from the IBPOC community says, I want to be on the Trails Committee, if we are a committee of 7, we are going to open that up and create that space for them. I think that is an action item that we can all agree to and make sure that that is something that the clerk's department can actively make happen. I'm looking for consensus of council on that for sure.
Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Again, when we're talking about not trying to weigh voices. We're not trying to. I appreciated the way that Guy and Bob and Melissa and Cassidy, sort of framed that for us. It's about not discounting voices, but getting voices to count. And I think a move to add a spot on each of our committees, specifically for the IBPOC community as interest is shown. I think that's a great move. And again, I think it's something that we don't have to wait to do. I mean, it might. I'm not saying it's going to be implemented tomorrow. I mean, we have to get the mechanics into place, and we know we've got a lot of other things going on. But I think it's something we can certainly aim to for the final year by August or September. Get it done through the summer, so that when committees start up again, we know that often May, June, July can sometimes be sort of less busy times for some of our advisory committees. But getting those mechanics in place so that people can show their interest and be added to those committees by July and August, so when they're ready to go. I think that's a great goal. And if it can happen quicker, I just wanted to be realistic. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Gerbert. Are you finished, Councillor Hellman? Okay. You still have the floor.
Thank you, through the mayor. Nigel, thank you for your delegation. And recently I had attended a meeting with a working group where a Black woman in the community left words heavy on my heart and soul. And I made a commitment to myself in that moment that I was going to be a more deliberate and active ally to the IBPOC community. So with your words and being heavy-hearted and not feeling safe with your actions in support in Wilmot, if any member of council, any member of staff, any member of the community ever make you feel like a minority that is not being heard, I want to be your ally. So please always reach out, and I'm happy to actively mediate with that. I want to be the best ally that I can be to the people of color in Wilmot.
Councillor Fenning.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. I'm not sure if it's required, but I would like to say that I do support Councillor Hallman's suggestion that we open up committees to have a permanent seat reserved for somebody from the Indigenous, Black, or people of color communities. One of the reasons that I think that is an extremely effective mechanism is because of my participation in the National Farmers Union. National Farmers Union was founded in 1969, and I'll go very briefly. In 2019, I attended the fifth AGM, and at that, a number of people who had been founders were present and spoke. And it was beautiful and entertaining and interesting in so many ways. And one of the things that one of the gentlemen got up and was talking about why it is that the National Farmers Union has had a women's seat at every level of government within the organization since its inception. And he said, well, in 2015, when Trudeau was elected and said about cabinet, why 50% women, and well, because it's 2015. He says that's an old line. He stole our line. We said back in '69 that we were putting women at every level of the organization, reserving a space for them because it's 1969. And his perspective on it, while humorous, he was also sad that we were still having to have that conversation today. And so I know from my experience within that organization and what an incredible powerhouse it is for women and women in farming and women in rural communities. I know that what having that one dedicated seat at the table means. And that is part of making systemic change. So I'm very much in support of this. And I think that we should do whatever we can to expedite the process of implementing it.
Thank you, Councillor Fanning. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Nigel, thank you so much for having the courage to share tonight. It was very meaningful. And I agree with Councillor Gordick and Councillor Hallman. I believe we should get these programs going right away. I was kind of under the impression when Councillor Gerber made that motion that it would happen this year. So I was a little bit surprised that it was going to be happening in 2022, but that's something we should get moving right away for sure.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ms. Middleholtz.
Okay, so through you, Mayor Armstrong, I just want to clarify. So the Inclusion and Diversity Advisory Committee, yes, every intention for it to be this year. What I was referring to was a seat on each committee. So that's two separate things I was talking about, just to provide that clarity. My apologies for not being clear on that.
Okay, I see no further comments or questions. So thanks again, Nigel, for coming and speaking. Our next speaker is Mr. John Bailey.
Good evening.
Welcome, John.
Good evening, and thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak with regards to the staff report on inclusion and diversity and our ongoing process around the Prime Minister's path. First, I would like to welcome the team from First Peoples Group this evening and thank them for their time and their patience in this process so far. It's truly an honor to have you here and long overdue. And so thank you very much for that. I'm sure that the team has already ascertained that they are stepping into a contentious issue here in Wilmot, and that the situation here certainly exists inside a much bigger framework of tensions around conscious and unconscious systemic racism inside and outside of the corporation of the Township of Wilmot, the elected representatives, and among residents here. So there are a significant number of residents here that have very serious concerns about the process by which this consultation process will be undertaken and the level of openness and transparency with which it will be conducted. So it's crucially important that we, the concerned residents here, are assured that a fulsome and comprehensive review of the information surrounding the current situation is undertaken. Without this, the process will exist in only a carefully controlled vacuum and will inflict further harm on this community. For some background, the Prime Minister's Path project was presented by CreateScape Waterloo Region, was thoroughly reviewed, examined, and delegated upon in 2014 by the City of Kitchener and its residents. The process of reviewing the project was thorough, and the residents were allowed access and participation in the decision-making process. It was decided that the project and all of the complications and divisive attention was not suitable for their city or to be displayed on public property in Victoria Park. Then CreateScape Waterloo Region found a home for the first of the bronze statues of the series at University of Waterloo. After a backlash from faculty and students and a lengthy petition, the university made the decision to back out of the project and gave the Sir John A. Macdonald statue back to CreateScape Waterloo Region. After a series of off-the-record meetings between Wilmot Mayor Armstrong and former CAO Grant Whittington, they approached CreateScape Waterloo Region with a plan to bring the Prime Minister's Path project to the public space beside the municipal offices in Baden. A secret committee was set up to guide the process, and the project was eventually put through for a vote by then councillors, with a motion submitted and signed by Mayor Armstrong and former clerk Barbara McLeod. There was no public consultation, no opportunity for input, and 0 delegations were heard prior to the vote to proceed. This kind of manipulation of the democratic process in order to rubber stamp a significant project like this into existence is a single but powerful example of the multiple levels of dysfunction within the township. It gives no credit to the fact that this community is one of great compassion, wisdom, and truly values democracy and public engagement. and clearly would have undertaken the decision-making process with vigor and balance, and would clearly have been able to discern this process with integrity without the need for outside consultants. It is inside this framework and the broader global reckoning around race, justice, and colonial symbols of power and oppression that this consultation is taking place. While we understand that this dysfunction in elected leadership is solved at the ballot box, and given time, that will be decided by residents. But dysfunction in due process and issues around openness and transparency from bureaucracy are a barrier to this. So as a team, you have inherited a very difficult and emotional situation here, fraught with systemic issues, which clearly add to the complications around this process. While the team at First Peoples Group considers many of the dynamics at play here in Wilmot, it's important to have a clear picture of some of the other issues. On the symbolic, one of the most important and meaningful traditions that have been added to the beginning of each public meeting of council is the reading of the land acknowledgement to the territory on which we reside. Many who follow our local municipal politics have asked why our mayor has never read the land acknowledgement at the beginning of a meeting. Whether intentional or unintentional, this sends a message to the community that he is not willing to follow this incredibly important gesture as set out in the calls to action from the TRC. Clearly, this is beyond the scope of FPG's process, but we would like to see some guidance with respect to this and other important recommendations from the calls to action. On the substantive, FPG must consider recommendations and their context with respect to the tensions here in Wilmot regarding the multiple direct confrontations and harassment by white supremacist individuals at the peaceful sit-in demonstrations at the SJAM statue, the posting of White Lives Matter posters from a globally connected hate group appearing on posts here, the distribution of hate propaganda shoved in residents' doors, racist graffiti, and the sabotaging of Black Lives Matter signs and displays around the community, and the ongoing police investigations around this. The consultation and the work around it clearly exist in this context. On the systemic, FPG must consider the broader complications around with the entire Prime Minister's Path project, and not just the issues focused around Sir John A. Macdonald statue. In many ways, William Lyon Mackenzie King had an even more problematic history, and the presence of that statue should be examined with the same veracity as SJAM. This entire project, while it was undertaken to include all 23 prime ministers, has only made it through 5 installations, with another of the unfortunate 4 still in storage. And it must be noted that the ongoing negative attention around this project and the reluctance of donors to continue will likely affect the entire viability of this entire project. As the individuals involved with CreateScape Waterloo Region are mostly of retirement age, it is also unlikely in this climate that the project would ever have gotten to completion of all 23, which leaves Wilmot with a very difficult challenge. With only these 6 statues in their collection and no real forward progress, the systemic decisions around the best use of that public space, considering its problematic lineage, suggest that a different site, perhaps a private facility, rather than a public space, would be more appropriate, so that a more welcoming space could be provided for all residents of Wilmot Township. Which brings us back to the staff report on anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion. While First Peoples Group is an Indigenous organization, and we are incredibly grateful for your wisdom, experience, and leadership through this difficult process, the weight and ratio with which the consultations with individuals and groups in our community that are Indigenous, Black, and persons of color must be given the appropriate consideration for the harm that has been inflicted on these individuals and their families. It is also crucially important that FPG seek consultations with Chinese Canadians whose history is connected with the brutal labor practices of Sir John A. Macdonald and weigh their experiences accordingly. This process has much potential to expose these individuals to even more harm, and the honesty, openness, and transparency of the process must be paramount and demonstrated clearly. There have been some very disturbing and tone-deaf letters and delegations submitted to Wilmot Township from residents that have a very difficult time coming to terms with the ugliness that has surfaced here. Otherwise good, kind-hearted people that just simply cannot believe this exists here because it doesn't affect them personally. While there are many white Wilmot settlers that feel strongly that the statues should remain and continue, there are also a great many white Wilmot settlers that strongly believe that the project must be halted and moved to a private space where they can be presented with proper context, historical accuracy, and meaningful education materials. Despite the painful flaws that have been discussed here, what needs to be emphasized is that Wilmot Township is an incredible place to live. Our communities have brought fantastic energy to amazing projects, service clubs, faith communities, arts and culture organizations, and many, many more. The immense amount of energy and care put into the restoration and ongoing beautification of Castle Kilbride, the curation of its legacy and its important and resonant history, and its presence here are a very proud ongoing accomplishment of Wilmot residents. The people here are kind, compassionate, and generous with their time and resources to make this an amazing place to live. What can get lost in these very emotional discussions is that Wilmot is dealing with these ugly issues of racism head on, directly, loudly, and publicly, while many other communities have allowed the quiet and toxic cancer of hate to fester in the shadows. We will not tolerate this here, and we are incredibly proud of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any comments or questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you, John, for coming to see us. Our next delegation is Cheyenne Thorpe.
Hi, can everybody see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So hey, Kulamasi Hush, Wonashi to Councilman Gerber for providing tonight's land acknowledgement. My name is Cheyenne Thorpe. I've spent time living in New Hamburg for many years. I have immediate family residing in town. I have deep ties to the city. I no longer like to admit myself as a resident, part-time or otherwise, of Wilmot Township, despite my still residing within Waterloo region. I recognize that certain members of council and community that this makes me an outsider of this township. It is for that reasoning and discrimination alone that I have chosen to maintain mine and my family's safety and well-being by ensuring that that isn't something that I share as public knowledge. Despite my home's address within Wilmot Township or otherwise, my true descent is one that connects in the deep roots to the lands you all pay acknowledgement to in each one of every one of these meetings. I am a two-spirit mother of Haudenosaunee and Lenape descent, having spent the majority of childhood living on or surrounding the Six Nations of Grand River Territory. My preferred pronouns are she, her. I have never once felt like an outsider on the traditional territory lands that have long since been established. And despite comments made publicly by this council's leadership, I still do not feel as if I'm an outsider to the community that I care for. I address council this evening with the hopes of making some introductory inquiries in regard to the beginning of consultation between Wilmot Township and the First Peoples Group surrounding CreateScape's Prime Minister's Path project. I address this council both as a concerned citizen of Waterloo Region and of the territory lands, as well as an anti-racism advisor currently employed by the region of Waterloo. I'm speaking independently this evening on all fronts. These talks begin at an incredibly sensitive and dangerous time in our community, with hate flowing freely and white supremacy running rampant. These issues have been building to a burst for a long time coming now, perhaps most strongly fueled by ignorance toward racial discrimination at the hands of our own leaders, as well as the divide caused by the call for the absolute removal of the Prime Minister's Path project. We are seeing more brazen attempts to divide our community based on misinformation, feelings of hate, and racial bias amongst our very own township members. We are seeing more empty promises by leadership and an effort to denounce white supremacy across our region, coming at a time that is far too little too late. To quote scholar, social worker, and fellow anti-racism advisor, Kathy Hogarth, in an article in the New Hamburg Independent dated April 26, 2021, this is ongoing work. It's hard work. It's frustrating work when you see constructed white ignorance upheld in white supremacy. I addressed this very council in the summer of 2020 in response to a discriminatory Facebook post shared by Les Armstrong stating his support behind the White Lives Matter movement. He was asked by community members at that time to denounce white supremacy, as well as violent extremists that came to the beck and call of his support at such a hateful and misguided movement. Les refused. He provided shallow, baseless, and discouraging reasoning behind his ability to denounce anyone's presence in our community and made no effort to further denounce white supremacy or the roots that it was taking amongst youth, as well as the vandalism and violence that it was causing all across our township. With the journey towards consultation on the Prime Minister's Path project beginning, and with a recent statement released by this very council, I would be interested in hearing more about Les's journey towards his apparent change of heart and mind when it comes to the issues of white supremacy. What have been the main enlightenments that have helped you to better understand the importance of only now denouncing white supremacy? I would also be interested to know whether or not the White Lives Matter movement is something that Les supports personally during his time working as the leader of our township. Lastly, I would like to know if Les understands the direct correlation between his past actions, as well as the direct refusal to deny white supremacy last summer, and the brazen attempts we are seeing now to breed hate and divide amongst our community surrounding racial inequality. Our response to these inquiries at the end of my statement would be greatly appreciated. A copy of these inquiries and this statement has been made available to the clerk. I know that with all of these concerns being highlighted, that the sheer concept of further dialogue on these matters must be incredibly exhausting to many, especially the process of a long-winded, Wilmot staff supervised and funded consultation process regarding issues that have already caused such harm in our communities to families of all sorts of diversities. Other supporters and I crossed many thresholds when attempting peaceful protest and public education last summer at Castle Kilbride, and the history of those few months alone is of intense extremes and vast amounts of occurrences. We would like to better understand the process in which this was all initially presented, the history behind the project that has been provided to date, and whether or not there are levels of bias that linger here, not only between Wilmot staff and First Peoples Group, but also regarding past decisions made by First Peoples Group in areas such as Kingston, Ontario. Considering your highlight on the importance on prioritizing resident input overall, how are you going to ensure that urban Indigenous and other voices of affected diversities alike are going to not only be heard, but amplified and recognized in the light of truth and reconciliation as they should be, especially in a primarily settler community, which has shown a disdain for Indigenous leaders and community members in the past? How are we to be assured that a precedent has not been set in the handling of these bronze statues? How are we to feel confident in the decision-making without further fear of re-traumatization and detriment being brought to our community? How are Indigenous individuals to trust that their voices will now be heard and amplified when it's come at such a cost so far down the road? Has the project's full and complete history been received in its entirety for adequate evaluation? That includes past delegations and presentations to this council and other boards regarding Createscape's Prime Minister's Path project. So in my understanding from what I've gathered from listening just recently, you guys haven't received anything to date. That'll be a part of the information gathering process. So my next question would lead into directly being, is that information provided surrounding the project going to be made available for public viewing in the spirit of a truthful and transparent process? Again, all of these questions have been made available to the clerk for distribution. So I'm hoping that everybody will be able to obtain a copy of them and we'll be able to have answers for these, if not by our next meeting, by the engagement process for sure. I am eager to see efforts being made to ensure that this process is completed in a timely manner. I'm hopeful in engaging in the process of communication and better understanding about the First Peoples group and their overall goals as Indigenous leaders in this space. I'm exhausted by the idea of how much more free labor is going to be involved in this long-winded debate, as well as community engagement. I am excited by the notion that the tides are changing in certain areas of our nation and the world to finally realize that idolizing someone in bronze in a public space is a poor way to pay homage and respects. All of the issues that I have touched on this evening can be summed up to a need for one thing: anti-racism advisory action within Wilmot Township, with a highlight of individualized supports required in the cities of New Hamburg and Baden. The City of Kitchener, University of Waterloo, as well as the region of Waterloo, have all established independent anti-racism advisory positions of all natures in these past months. So my questions to council would be, what actions have been taken by Wilmot leaders or staff to implement these sort of anti-racism frameworks into this township? And do leaders agree with the need for anti-racism action in this township? So for my final notes, I've briefly put together since listening to this meeting. I'd like to remind everybody listening that this consultation process is only happening at the cause of public protest, outrage, and strenuous emotional labor by community members. I can appreciate that councillors and the mayor being appreciative of your presence from here on out, but I must highlight the struggle that came along the way of sheerly having this consultation process come to light. I do look forward to seeing the work that the First Peoples group looks to complete within the township. I have many hopes, even after a few concerning distinctions and comparisons that have been made tonight and the influence of a primarily settler council sitting before us. I am eager to see exactly how this consultation process is going to unfold, following the protocols that have been set by the First Peoples group in their strategy planning. And in finality, in response to Angie's pledge this evening to BIPOC individuals who have been directly affected by Wilmot Council and staff, I would say that individuals like myself are actively looking for you to be an ally to many of us, as many of us have been publicly attacked by those very members of community and continue to stand by us in those efforts towards anti-racism efforts and affiliation. So Wanishi, for allowing me to share my time and concerns and inquiries this evening. I apologize that it is a lot, so thank you.
Thank you, Cheyenne. Comments or questions from council? Councillor Hallman?
Hi, Cheyenne. It's nice to see your face this evening. Thank you for taking your time. I did want to make this statement with you, with the First Peoples group here, because there are members of our community who identify as Indigenous, who are terrified to come forward, as I'd mentioned earlier, because of Cheyenne's experience that she had. I have made some connections to residents who have stayed in contact with me, but because of Cheyenne's experience of hate digitally or in person, I'm hoping that they will feel safe to connect with you independently, but Cheyenne will share with you her experiences through this process. But my fear is that the lack of leadership that we showed Cheyenne last summer and the lack of allyship that we showed Cheyenne last summer led the other people who weren't willing, with the strength that Cheyenne brought, to share her trauma with us all, that they won't be heard. So Cheyenne, I'm sorry for last summer, and I wish that I was a better ally then. I'm looking forward to being a better ally with you moving forward. And I appreciate being called out whenever I need room to grow. So I look forward to that too. But thank you for taking your time and putting yourself out there again, representing the community that you stand for.
Thank you, Councillor Hallman. Councillor Fenning, please.
I'm going to echo much of what Councillor Holman said. Cheyenne, I'm really grateful that you were willing to come and speak to us tonight. I know at least some of what you've been through. And I think that that's something, you know, a lot of people need to understand. My experience is not your experience, but each of us who have experienced any kind of trauma, having to relive it, having to retell it, takes a toll every time we have to do it. And every time that we, as settlers, ask Indigenous people to retell their trauma and retell their experience to convince us of why action is needed, we are doing further harm. I've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot from you, Cheyenne, and I thank you for that. I hope that I can contribute as much to your life. So thank you again for being here.
Guy, do you wish to speak?
Yes, just briefly, thank you, Cheyenne, for your presentation. When I mentioned my lack of knowledge of the region, I also talked about Melissa's vast knowledge of the region and Bob's connection through his life at Six Nations and in the area as well. So I want to assure you that we do have a good basis for information of lives lived in the area. And it is just part of our normal practice to wherever we're doing a project to brief us up as much as possible on all aspects. And that will include discussions with, I would hope, not only yourself, but also the previous presenter, as well as Nigel, who spoke a bit earlier. I want to assure you that the process that we had in Kingston was probably the inverse to this, where the urban Indigenous community was consulted with on every issue to a point there was probably fatigue in that, and that the neighboring First Nations there was a lack of that. And so that's not been flipped on its side, but it's been brought in to be a territorial consultation. And that's part of the work that we do as well. And one of the items that I didn't mention, I don't know how long you were on the line for the work that we've done, but it includes a very large project. It's a little bit postponed because of COVID, but our firm's been engaged to work with the CATS, which is the airport screening officers across the country, to train 8,500 airport screening officers and 1,500 managers on the care and custody of sacred and ceremonial items, where many passengers have received treatment that they probably didn't want to receive at airports when they were traveling across our country and across all of North America and worldwide with their sacred items and bundles. And so it's work that we don't take lightly. And as I said, I just hope we can get to meet you to earn your trust on how we can create that safe space in all of our dialogue. Anybody else want to comment on that? Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gordick, did you wish to speak? No, okay. Okay, thank you for your presentation, Cheyenne. Our next speaker is Nancy Burris.
There we go. Am I with you?
We can hear you, Nancy.
Okay, I think maybe you can even see me except for the light there. Thank you very much. Mayor Armstrong, councillors, members of the First Peoples Group. It's wonderful for you to be here tonight. I really appreciate it. You know, to all in attendance here tonight, it's appreciated that people are taking the time to engage in this conversation. First of all, I'd like the previous delegates to note that Mayor Armstrong is well acquainted with the Indigenous community, having been married to a woman of Indigenous background. So I think that needs to be noted. My presentation tonight will be relatively short compared to everybody else's. I'm speaking tonight to question and comment on a few things in regards to the Prime Minister's path, consultation process, and recent happenings in Wilmot. I heard from a friend the other day, otherwise I wouldn't have known, that there was information on the township website about the upcoming consultation process by the First Peoples group in regards to the Prime Minister's path. I asked my Ward 5 Councillor Angie Holman by email on Thursday, April 22nd, if she'd be agreeable to sending the information and link to her email list, as she does send information regarding township activities, regulations, COVID, etc., and other matters from time to time. I, for one, do not regularly check into the township website, and I'm sure there are a lot of other township residents who do not regularly check the township website unless they have something specific they're looking for. I felt it was a good idea to, that it would be a good idea to alert as many people as possible that the groundwork has been laid for the consultation process. And one way to do this is for the councillors to spread the word to their constituents, the people they're supposed to be representing. A second email to Councillor Holman on Saturday, 24th, also went unacknowledged. Does she not want the general public to be aware of the PMP consultation process, that it's beginning? The peculiar thing is that I also had emailed Councillor Holman the same day to inquire about the freezer in the New Dundee Park booth. She very kindly acted on this and responded to me within 24 hours, which was much appreciated. Why, Councillor Holman, did you not acknowledge my email regarding the consultation process and my suggestion and request to forward to your email list of constituents? Is it because you do not want the public to learn more about the consultation process? On another matter regarding the abhorrent posters advertising White Lives Matter, the rally that were found in New Hamburg, the media reported that a very few posters, between 2 and 6, and mind you, that is 2 or 6 too many, were found. They were found, shared, and or commented on by Councillors Holman, Gorgic, and Citizen John Bailey. To me, it's a coincidence that the people who've been branding Wilmot as a haven for racism are the ones to have discovered these posters. And how is it that these posters have not been reported to being found in any other communities in Waterloo region? It's also been inferred by some in news coverage that people who are in agreement with the Prime Minister's path are white supremacists. I don't believe this is the case at all. If we want to keep a fire under control, why do some people fan the flames? I hope that each of you will do whatever you can to stop any unproductive comments so First Peoples group can get on with their job. As Tyler Perry said in last night's Oscar Humanitarian Award acceptance speech, refuse hate. We need to accept everybody and we need to respect every life. He dedicated his award, in quotes, to anyone who wants to stand in the middle, because that's where healing happens. That's where conversation happens. That's where change happens. It happens in the middle. Where do you stand? Thank you for your time and attention. Are there any questions? Any
Thank
comments?
you, Nancy. It looks like Councillor Holman has a question or comment.
Thank you through the mayor. Ms. Burris, you are incorrect in that I did not find the posters myself. Constituents reported it to me. I directed them to the police. They were also found in Wellesley. So that needs to be on the record that that data that you presented was not valid. Secondly, my contact list contains several Indigenous people who I reached out to see if this would cause them harm or be productive. I'm waiting to hear back from them before I were to send a group anything. And that time, people who are engaged have been seeing, and I had many questions for the First Peoples group this evening, and no active consultation has resulted. So by sending that information out, it would not be a productive aspect as there was nowhere to direct. So with the actions of the next items coming forward, when there's productive pieces to share with the community, I'm greatly looking forward to using all of my social media platforms in any way that would not cause harm to people who don't want to experience further trauma to share with them. As I have mentioned before, I firmly stand with the IBPOC community. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud to be an ally and put their feelings and their trauma first.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
First of all, Councillor Hallman, I did not infer that you found them necessarily. I said between the three of you, they were either found, shared, or commented on. So in your case, I believe you shared the information, you know, with the police and other councillors, and you know, that was fine. In terms of, you know, not wanting to share the information that's on the township public website, I don't understand still. I mean, if Indigenous people in the community are they afraid to go to the township website? All I was asking of you was to share the fact that people can go to the township website to find this information, and alert them to the fact that now the groundwork's being laid. It's been wonderful that members of this First Peoples group have been here tonight at this meeting. And I think as many people as possible should know about it.
To the Mayor, while I am thankful that you feel safe, there are people who, if I send a mass email out to, do not feel safe. They are scared. They want to hear about vaccines. They want to hear about, and when people reach out to me to say they want to stay in the process, I will absolutely specifically identify that, or I've directed them to the clerk, as the clerk's department can share that when people have reached out, they have been sent to the clerk to stay informed, as they will be on that list. But I will not cause harm to people who are fearful of experiencing harm, and the people who feel comfortable for being engaged, they're finding their way. And I will happily support more details when they come through, with finding a way to not cause harm to people in the community.
I hope you'll find a way someday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Our next delegation are Pat and Dennis Mighton.
Okay, I think we're unmuted. Can you hear?
We can hear you.
Okay, good, thank you. Thanks, Mayor Armstrong. We have been waiting, Dawn will tell you sometimes not very patiently, for this consultation process to begin. And we just want to say, Dennis is here with me, we are really excited tonight to be introduced to the members of the First People group who are going to be working with the people here in Wilmot. So to Bob and Guy and Melissa and Cassidy, welcome here. Thank you very much. We're looking forward to speaking with you about this process. So that's all we wanted to say there. But we have another question for Councillor Hallman. It's along the same lines as Nancy's, in that we only found out through a friend that the First Peoples group were to be introduced tonight. And this is such an important event in Wilmot Township, one that most of us have been waiting for almost a year now. And it seemed a shame that we had to find out this through hearsay. So after hearing that indeed you folks were going to be here, we went online to try and find out the council agenda, read through the council agenda. There was nothing in it that would indicate, in fact, that you were going to be here. So we're really glad we found it, really glad to have met you. And in spite of the fact that the COVID has prevented us from meeting in person, you actually were right here in our kitchen, and that was kind of nice, kind of an intimate introduction. But to further Nancy's question, how will the residents of the township, all of the residents, be notified that the consultation process has begun, that we all will be given an opportunity, as we wish, to meet with Guy and Arnie Cassidy is going to be taking the lead here, and I know we're all looking forward to doing that. How are we going to find that out? And I know it's further there. We did go on the website, and there's a page, the Prime Minister's Past Engagement page, I think it's called. We went on that, and you had to go down, and there was a bar at the bottom of the page where you click to subscribe to receive notices. And so I did that. I subscribed to receive notice, and it said that we would get a confirmation from the township. we didn't, but I was proactive enough to get in touch with John and say, can you make sure we're on the list? And I think we are, so that's fine. But I'm really concerned that not everybody is going to know about it. And so I guess second Nancy's question, how are we to be notified? Can't hear. Is there an answer?
Hi, Dennis and Pat. I can jump in here. If you reach out to the clerk's department, have you been in communication with them for reaching out? If you notify them that you want to be engaged in the process, they will keep you notified. That's how that works. And if you follow any of the social media channels that the township provides, the Facebook page, the Twitter accounts, they actively engage there, and the pop-ups often on the website as well engage with new council meetings that are coming up. And as we ask for further transparency this evening that council has supported, there'll be agendas and minutes that come up with that too that you can actively participate and follow in.
Okay, I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor Holman, but there are many people, maybe more in our generation than in younger generations, who don't engage in social media. I don't tweet. I don't have a Twitter account. I do have a Facebook account, but I don't regularly. Well, actually, I never post, and I don't regularly read Facebook. I'm not on other social media platforms. So how are those of that particular portion of the population, how are we supposed to know that we even should have looked for this?
Ms. Middleholtz wishes to address.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Mighton. So part of the work that the working group has been having with First Peoples Group is we've been talking about different ways of reaching as many people as possible. So at this point in time, we don't have a specific mode in which we're going to be getting things out to all of the residents, but we are going to be exploring, let's say, non-digital modes of reaching people as well. So we want as many people involved in this as possible. So we're trying to explore what those different avenues are. I'm not sure if somebody from First Peoples Group wants to comment on this, but certainly that has been part of our conversation is, as I said, the non-digital ways of reaching people. Not everybody likes to spend all their day on their computer and on their phone, and some people just also don't have access to that technology. So we want to make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible.
Okay, thank you. And may I just add that perhaps because we don't really engage in the social media platform, maybe that's partly why we have been extremely ignorant of the racist activities that are apparently happening in our community that we had no knowledge of and are appalled to hear about.
Yeah, hi, thank you for that comment. And I join you in the social media vacuum. I tell all people that might want to hear my voice that I'm like Woody from Toy Story. I don't know what most of these buttons do. And I want to assure you that we have a great team of people that will take into consideration what you're saying, because we really are truly just getting started on this process. And your comments have been important and helpful for us to point out these concerns that you have with respect to the technology, with respect to notification, but also with the other presenters with respect to some of the concerns that they've raised in their poignant comments and remarks. And we will do everything we can to move this conversation forward and forward in a good way. There was going to be some time where we're going to have to look sort of to the side of what's going on, and once in a while we might want to check the rearview mirror. But most of our work is how we move forward, and how we move forward with what I think is missing in a lot of the planet these days, which is, as was said earlier, the word dignity, but also with grace. And that's what we're going to try and do. And we run a hopeful firm, and I think we're a hopeful nation. And I believe that together, not like the pandemic together, but together, we're going to make a positive difference in Wilmot Township. And you're going through some tough issues that every part of the country is going through, and that's just how we grow as a better country, learning things that make us a little bit uncomfortable, and how we can find solutions that can take some of that pressure off for people that are feeling in those ways. So we will just do our best, and we are trained traditionally to do that, to learn from the best, to be our best, and to deliver the best services for you. And that's our commitment to you as a company.
Thank you so much. It's been really a delight to meet the four of you online this evening, and sure hope that at some point in this consultation process we get a chance to meet with you in person. But we're looking forward to the whole process, and hope it is a productive. I'm sure it will be, just because having met the four of you online tonight. Yeah, it was wonderful to meet you, and we're looking forward to having the opportunity to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Next delegation is David Atkinson.
Okay.
Welcome, David.
Hi, folks. How are you? I wasn't sure whether video is supposed to be on or off. In previous times, it's been off, but anyway, we'll go with it on this time. Is that okay? Is that okay?
Absolutely. We'd like to see who we're talking to.
Great. Perfect. Okay. So thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak. I greatly look forward to the work that the First Peoples Group will do to ensure that all opinions are given audience as we navigate these difficult issues. I would like to echo what the previous delegate had said about how exciting it is to listen to the way that the First Peoples Group deals with these things, and the extensive experience that you have, and hearing your passion for the subject is incredible, and you are to be admired. As a member of this community, I feel obliged to speak up when things are not being done properly. When we as a community are being unfairly depicted, when we are not being properly represented, or when actions taken or words spoken are likely to cause harm to our community. Racism is unacceptable. Nobody is denying that. I'm not here to minimize the experiences of any person who has experienced racism, including those of Mr. Gordick. I don't have a racist bone in my body. I work and play with people from all over the world. The question of the PMP project is not about racism. Now, moving directly to the topic at hand, a quick review of events of the last 11 months or so clearly shows a small number of folks, some of whom have spoken tonight and some of whom sit on council, repeatedly conflating a narrative of systemic racism with support for the Prime Minister's path. The PMP is history. It's not sociology. Being in favor of displaying our country's history, warts and all, does not equate to agreeing with all the things that history represents. We've all heard the adage, the one who learns not from history is destined to repeat it. I'd like to add a corollary to that adage. The one who shields himself from the learning of history will still repeat it. Regrettably, there is a small number of anonymous racist people in Wilmot, but it is unfair and irresponsible to paint the overwhelming majority of the community with that brush. Those few people need to be dealt with without besmirching the entire township. As much as it is possible for my apology to soothe any harm that has been done, I apologize to anyone in this community who has been treated unfairly due to skin color or any other racially motivated reason. I appreciated Councillor Fenning's comments about wanting to bring the community together. I am completely 100% in favor of that as well. I would like to suggest a starting point for that goal. Wilmot residents absolutely deplore racism in all forms. And this is something I challenge all councillors to affirm. Just this past Friday, Councillor Gordick is quoted in the record as stating, in context of white supremacy, that, I quote, there's this ugly underbelly that's here in Wilmot. I believe Councillor Gordick fully understands the sordid image that phrase suggests. I'd love for Councillor Gordick to stand by that comment and all the ugliness it suggests about this township and its residents on the record. As a member of this community, I am appalled that an elected representative would feel justified, without evidence, in referring generally to the community in that way. Councillor Gordick, do you stand by that comment on the record? To repeat one of my earlier statements, Wilmot residents absolutely deplore racism in all forms. This is something I challenge all councillors to affirm. Will councillors answer the following question on the record? Do you believe the majority of Wilmot residents are racist? Previous speakers have decried the fact that this project was approved without transparent public consultation to determine whether or not it causes harm to various communities. In almost the same breath, they're also now trying to shut down the very type of consultation they said wasn't done in the first place. And it was interesting to hear at least one of the delegates complain that the project has stalled when it was their intervention that has stalled it. We can't change what happened at the beginning of this project. Indeed, until a year ago, there was no issue. First Peoples Group is a uniquely qualified group to shepherd this consultation. I strongly urge councillors to proceed with this consultation so we can once and for all understand the best way forward for the project and for the community of Wilmot Township. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any comments or questions from Mr. Atkinson? Councillor Fenning.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. At no time have I ever said that the majority of Wilmot Township residents are racist. In fact, it's the exact opposite that I have repeatedly said. So I'm I don't know where your assertion comes from that I would have ever painted everyone in this community or even the majority as racist. In fact, just earlier tonight, I reaffirmed my belief that most people in this community are loving, welcoming, and inclusive people. I'm sorry that this is how you have interpreted things that have been said, but I would ask you to please read statements that I have made publicly, re-listen to things that I've said, and hear what I've actually said.
Thank you, Councillor Fenning.
Do I get a chance to respond? Sir?
Yes, Dave, go ahead.
Okay, so even if the words aren't specifically said, it's quite clear that the underlying opinion or the underlying thing that's being said about the community is that this is a racist, that we're racist because we don't approve of the statues being taken down. This is what this whole thing has centered around. And the only thing I'm trying to get across here is that I want to decouple this whole discussion of racism, which does not define this community in any way, shape, or form, from the discussion of the Prime Minister's path. So all I'm asking is confirmation or affirmation from the councillors that they do not, as you have said, you do not believe that the township residents in Wilmot are racist. That's all I'm asking.
Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. So similar to what Councillor Fenning has said, I do not believe all Wilmot residents are racist. However, I would be completely remiss to not acknowledge that there is racism here. My husband has been accosted due to his color. As we've already heard from Cheyenne, she has been accosted due to her position on the statues. Children on the school bus going past the Fennings farm have yelled out racial epithets. There is a student at WO who's constantly called the N-word. To ignore that there is a racist issue within any community is not, it's criminal. And I'm not saying that all Wilmot residents are, but I do stand by my comment that there is a current of racism here that if you do not want to acknowledge it, I am sorry. However, I am acknowledging it, that is there, and I will stand by the people of the IBPOC community to help their voices become heard so that there is no more trauma or hurt that we as Wilmot residents continue to impact them.
Okay, if I may respond to that as well. The term underbelly has connotations that are well known to people, and it basically refers to a seething criminal enterprise that is working in the shadows of an area that is trying to produce a certain result. That's what your comment was in the record, and that's how the majority of people would interpret it. When you use the term underbelly, it's not talking about the stomach of a snake. It's talking about an organized group of people working within a community, seeking to undermine it with whatever characteristic you put on it. And in this particular case, it was in the context of white supremacy. So as an elected representative of this community, I believe you need to be more discerning with the words that you use that are going in the record in a public newspaper defining our community. So if you're on the record of saying you stand by the fact that your statement that you believe that there is an underbelly of white supremacy in Wilmot, then that's fine. Put that on the record.
Okay, I see no further comments or questions. So thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
And I'll ask if there are any other.
Amy Kozlovich is here, sir. She registered it. She's here.
Oh, okay.
Amy Kozlovich.
Okay, we have another speaker, Amy Kozlovich.
Oh, good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Amy. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. I would put my camera on, but unfortunately it's past my bedtime and I'm not PG in my pajamas here. So I won't subject you all to that, but thanks for everyone staying on the line. It's been a long time. And wow, I just thought that the topic tonight was going to be in relation to the FPG consulting on the Prime Minister's path. But as we've all heard from many different people, Wilmot apparently is a hot mess right now. So I think anybody listening here can honestly say that they were shocked and saddened to hear about the various examples of racist acts within our own community, by Nigel, by, Councillor Fenning. And I'm sure that everyone here would vehemently denounce any kind of behavior of this type. Obviously we acknowledge that this type of behavior does happen here, but I do, in many ways have to concur with the previous delegate in that, the perception, unfortunately, due to comments made in the media by even council members such as Cheryl Gordick, have led people to the perception that we live in a community filled with racists and white supremacists, which is not the case. We all acknowledge that this ongoing battle is literally being fought everywhere in the world, in every city, in every town across the nation, in the world right now against racism. And all of us are vehemently standing with the BIPOC community against racism, and to just paint everyone, seemingly with that brush based on the types of words and the comments that are made and the perception that is drawn from reporters like Louisa D'Amato and the articles that she publishes in the record. It's really upsetting to a lot of the residents. I just have to put that out there. A lot of people are very upset that our communities, being smeared like this to be, painted as a community full of racists and white supremacists, which obviously we are not. And thank you, Jen, for standing up and for our community and for the people in it, and stating that yes, most of us are kind and loving. We give you the shirt off our backs in order to help you, especially if you're in trouble. So thank you for that. We really, I'm sure everyone appreciates that. So wow, now the FPG's really got a good look at what's going on here in Wilmot. It's probably a little more than they bargained for. But what I really wanted to say tonight was that as a resident of Wilmot Township, I am super pleased that the First Peoples Group has agreed to consult with us in regards to the matter of the Prime Minister's path. And it really sounds like your group does some incredible work. So I just can't say enough about how happy probably most of the residents are here to have you guys working with us on this matter, because obviously it's been a very contentious topic that's divided a lot of our community, unfortunately. And most residents, I would say, in the township are welcoming it of an objective group that's going to collaborate with all parties involved and ask for input from everyone of all of the residents in the community and the township to come to the decision that best supports the directives of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and addresses the needs of our community members. So I think everybody's really excited about this and really looking forward to learning a lot more about your group and even our own community. And I do believe that many think that this project, the Prime Minister's Path, is really a great opportunity to further explore the history of the Indigenous people and the effects that Sir John A. Macdonald's leadership had on them. This project represents not only the past, but it could really also be used as a vehicle to the future awareness about the treatment of Indigenous people, both past and present. This project could really be used to counter racism instead of being misconstrued by many as perpetuating it. There are so many ways in which this project could be used positively to promote a more accurate history of Canada and honor the directives of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Adding to that history with additional information, an Indigenous garden, and bronze statues of historical Indigenous leaders could complement the path beautifully. But there are many who oppose having the project here in Wilmot, and they've not wanted to speak about possible options or solutions that would potentially help to further the awareness of the history of all Indigenous people. They don't want to talk about ways in which we could possibly use the project to help curb racist behavior and attitudes towards the Indigenous, both here and elsewhere. Instead, sadly, they seem to label those who do not agree with their one and only option of removing the entire project from the township as racist. Many residents here, I know, are really hoping that the First Peoples Group's perspective, experience, and mediation skills are going to help to mend the fences of neighbors here in our community, as well as revealing the true hearts of our amazing township to the rest of the country. I can't say how happy I am about having First People on board, and I'm really looking forward to having everyone's voices heard on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, thanks again, Amy. Okay. Councillor Fanning.
Thank you. Mayor, I wanted to point out that I noticed a couple of the delegations have their hands raised. I assume they are requesting to address council again.
That'll be up to council to decide whether they want them to come back in or not. Those raised hands saying yes, we do. First one is Cheyenne Thorpe.
Can the Zoom host please promote Cheyenne? Thank you.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Welcome back, Cheyenne. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So a lot to unpack here, and I'm kind of glad that this is happening this evening because the First Peoples Group is getting a very first-hand glimpse at exactly how uphill this battle has been and exactly just how far we have to go in continuation to this battle. The idea, okay, sorry, there's so many things that were said and that were just complete either deflections to the issues at hand or that were just completely just preposterous in my opinion, especially in address to some of the women in council. So there has been a big mention of like, well, do you think that our town is racist or do you think that our township is racist? and associating it to only the women of council who are sitting here tonight, who have been standing behind BIPOC individuals and who are trying to uplift the support of the issues that are at hand. So for one, I think that is telling in itself. But I cannot stress enough that the idea that the Prime Minister's Path Project has been associated into acts of racism and prejudice by the very ones who are standing to educate the public to cause division and consultation is absolutely ignorant. It's absurdly ignorant. The individuals who are causing this divide, or how some of the previous delegates put it, are causing issues to this, or who are causing problems to this, are not the ones who are claiming or crying racism in these issues just to have the fact to do so, or just because SJAM or any of the other prime ministers are involved. The fact that certain delegates this evening has dismissed the harm and trauma and violence that community members have faced, whether or not they are in support of the Prime Minister's Path Project, just goes to show how deep the ignorance lies in regards to racial bias and issues of historical importance at the hands of SJAM and other prime ministers on the path, who have blatantly participated in acts of genocide towards various diversities still living in our very community. I don't know how many times members of those speaking towards and for anti-racism issues have to distinctify that it isn't BIPOC and affected individuals, not council members or otherwise, who are the ones perpetuating racism and bringing prejudice and violence into the question of these issues. Like we are never the ones who started making these issues about race or making these issues about that kind of inequality or bias. These supporters and the women sitting on council have never done anything but attempt to educate their public and uplift the efforts of anti-racism and peaceful protest in our community. And the fact that the biggest point of contention mentioned by the majority of delegates who come here tonight in favor of the Prime Minister's Path Project is that they're being associated with racism. And it's completely laughable to me as an individual, because it is your fellow community members and radicalized individuals who are marginalizing you as you are so against. It's not the individuals who are hoping for change and hoping to educate the public who are looking to marginalize you as racists. The presence of racial slurs and racial entities and symbolism associated in support of the Prime Minister's Path Project, it is not and has never been our main game, and has never been our issue, and it has never been a point of pushing in the public. And it's not one of those who are looking to it's not one of those who are looking to see change or who are looking to see different things happening in regards to this project. It is of those who are hoping to end conversations and dismiss us just as simply as members of delegation have done this evening. And I apologize, but I cannot believe the level of just sheer ignorance that has come about just being upset as being labeled as racist, as opposed to what BIPOC individuals have been facing and dealing with in this region and living with for years, for their entire lives. Like, you have to really take a step back and evaluate exactly what it is that you're mad about, why that is, and whether or not that has more to do with actual ego than it has to do with community or the women of council. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Cheyenne. And next speaker is Mr. John Bailey. Welcome, John. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak again. First of all, I feel like I need to just console somehow Melissa and Cassidy and Bob and Guy and on what you were hearing this evening. I'm sure you hear this from angry white settlers in many communities across this country, those types of perspectives. And I truly understand the difficulty with the process that you are undertaking. And I think by now you're getting a pretty good understanding of the mess that you're stepping into here, and we truly do appreciate your guidance and your leadership in this. I want to speak to a couple of things directly. First of all, I guess one of the things is that I guess I'm a little bit fearless in speaking out on things. And so, you know, whether it's in church, people ask me to speak because they would rather sit in the sidelines. So I don't mind. I'm comfortable with it. And so I'm often asked to speak about things, and I do because I guess I'm kind of fearless with it, and it doesn't bother me. But I acutely recognize that whenever I have spoken at one of these things, I'm contacted by so many people in this community that are afraid, that are terrified, that are unable to speak because they either work in a position with the region or with the township or in a business in the community where it would do tremendous harm to them and their business and their relationships if they were to speak publicly. And so I commend anybody who has been able to step out and speak to these issues. And they do so at their peril. But the difference is, I don't care. I don't need any more friends. I've got enough friends. And so I'm not worried about whatever backlash I get from this. So I am speaking boldly and bravely into this space because I know that I am speaking for a lot of people in this community who are not heard. Secondly, I do want to address this notion that there's a small number of very angry white settlers in this community, and you have seen some of them tonight, that are attacking the female councillors, and seemingly specifically Councillor Goydike, for acknowledging publicly that racism exists in this community. How dare she acknowledge that? How dare she speak up and say that we have a problem? Every community has a problem. Every community in Canada, United States, Japan, China, every country has issues of race. Every country has problems. And how dare she acknowledge that we have a problem? Is it an underbelly? I don't understand what this agenda is to categorize Councillor Goydike specifically as some sort of evil individual who's trying to destroy this community. All I have seen is exactly the opposite of that. You have seen delegation from Nigel Goydike this evening, and Nigel and Cheryl collectively lead the communities in this country in fundraising for the Terry Fox Foundation. They do many, many events. They are incredible people and have given of themselves so much and have taken nothing but abuse from angry white people in this town for speaking out and acknowledging the problems here. And so this kind of gotcha thing where people come on here and they delegate and accuse Councillor Goydike and Holman and Fenning of having some agenda to destroy this community and sully its brand. I absolutely categorically take issue with that. They have done nothing but the opposite. I think if you look on balance, all of those councillors, in fact, all of the councillors you see here this evening have done incredible things for this community in many, many ways. So to categorize that is just absolutely abhorrent. And I just want to put a stop to that immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And we have one more returnee, Dave Atkinson. You're on mute, Dave.
All right, sorry folks, I was rambling on there and didn't know I was muted. Okay, so I guess I want to start by saying that we clearly need to learn how to talk to each other instead of over each other, because that's what's going on here. To both Cheyenne and John, guys, I was only referencing Ms. Gordick, Councillor Gordick, because she's the one that was quoted in the paper. This is not a gender thing. It's nothing else than that. It was just, she's the one quoted in the paper. So please, let's not bring gender into this now. And you guys are the ones that brought race into this. When you start referring to people who are taking an opinion on one of these issues as being, in your words, John, angry white settlers, you said it twice. And you're trying to tell me that's not a racist thing? And second of all, do not think that it's only people of color, BIPOC people in this community that are in fear. You want to believe that there's not a whole ton of people that are not BIPOC people in this community that are scared to death to even bring their face and name forward in a forum like this. I got another thing coming. If you think that's true, you need to really wake up. So don't pull that on us. All right, this angry white settlers crap or this misogynistic I hate women thing, that is not going to do it. That's not what I said. And the only reason that she was even mentioned was because she made the quote in the paper. If you don't make those quotes in the paper, I'm going to leave you alone and treat you like everybody else. And John, you want to put a stop to it? That's exactly what this is not supposed to be. And you should be ashamed of yourself for even saying
I think
you
we have
want
to
to
be
put a
cautious of
stop to
decorum.
people's
Can we be
opinions.
cautious of decorum, Mayor?
Dave, you'll have to curb
have
your
to settle
rhetoric
down?
and
I have-
yes.
Okay, settling down. Okay. Now, when someone comes to a forum like this that is meant to air the opinions of the entire community, for anybody to say it's time to put a stop to it when the it is someone's opinion, that is absolutely counterintuitive to the idea what this process is about. I'm done.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Gerber, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Yeah, I appreciate the patience of First Peoples Group, and certainly your framing, Guy, and I want to get it right. So I'll probably refer to you. No blame, no shame. Was there a third one in that line, or was that sort of just a rhyming couplet? I just want to remember and maybe just remind everyone tonight as we seek to wrap things up and make sure everyone has heard how important that concept is.
Yeah, it was a rhyming triplet. There was blame, shame, and name.
Thank you.
And Bob will speak to that, maybe not address that in particular, but when we do wrap up for this evening, Bob will be providing our closing remarks on behalf of myself and Cassidy and Melissa.
Thank you. We have one more question or comment from Councillor Fenning, and then we'll cut it off.
I just wanted to ask the last speaker, Mr. Atkinson, and I don't require an answer, so he doesn't need to come back. But I'd ask him to think about his words where he said, if you don't speak, I won't bother you. If you're not quoted, I'll leave you alone. And I'd like you to think about what that statement means and what that says.
Okay, thank you. So call it there. So Robert, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council, and all the various delegations that that came forward. You know, when we were approached about this work, we were really interested in this, because one of the things that we've made it a point of working on over the last couple of years is to focus on issues of reconciliation and to focus on issues of dignity and nation building more generally. There's a really significant court case in British Columbia a number of years ago. And in that court case, it was being argued that there is no place in Canada for Indigenous self-government. This was when the Nisga'a self-government agreement was being put through the federal parliament. And in his decision, Justice Williamson said that the purpose of Confederation was to create unity out of diversity. And I don't think that that happened magically at the time of Confederation. I think it's an ongoing project, and it's been a bit of a bumpy road. Part of that road has been called cultural genocide, and we've had many other issues that we've had to encounter as different communities and nations within the nation of Canada. And we've seen a lot of passion here this evening, and that makes me really happy that folks are taking many of these issues obviously very seriously, and we're going to take them with the same sort of seriousness that we've seen demonstrated by council, by staff that we work with, and by the various delegations that have come forward before council. These are serious issues. And it's curious, some of the origins that have brought us together, all of us, from different journeys to focus on these issues. I think if we would have wondered a few, even not that long ago, whether an issue like Sir Johnny MacDonald and working through issues related to Sir Johnny MacDonald or other prime ministers could be a source of community building, could be a source of creating unity out of diversity, could be an opportunity to find ways of healing as families, individuals, and communities that might have been laughable. But who knows where this is going to lead us. So what I would encourage and ask for is patience for all of us as we work on this journey, and that we give respect to each other as part of this journey, and that we give the benefit of the doubt that people are doing their best, and they're trying to bring their best mind forward, they're trying to bring their best spirit forward and their best heart forward in terms of finding solutions. One of the things that Gord Downey talked about in terms of his challenge to all of us as a country with respect to reconciliation is just do something. Just do something. And I think we're going to have a chance to just do something. I don't know where that something is going to lead us to. But I have a feeling that with that passion and that sense of community and the desire for a powerful community, and people talked about children, and that idea that what we're really doing is we're creating a better place for those coming generations, those coming faces, the next 7 generations. And if we keep those 7 generations in mind in terms of this journey and the decisions that will be made and the work that will be done and the way that we speak to each other, maybe we'll create a different place in order to have conversation, to tackle some of these tough issues, and to, in a powerful way, find a way through some of these matters. I'm really looking forward to meeting so many of you. I really am. And from some of the delegations and some of the council, I'm really looking forward to this. And we're grateful for this opportunity to work with all of you. And we will, as I think Guy said earlier, we will work every day to earn your trust and to bring our very best selves to bear on the process that we're developing and the issues that lay before us. So, Chimigwech and Yorogoa, thank you very much for this opportunity to spend some time with you this evening.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thanks. On behalf of myself, and I'm sure others will echo, and as they should. Thank you all for being here. I think everybody can sort of tell when people are sort of talking about things and when they're walking things, and you can tell just by the way the four of you conduct and carry yourselves, and from just the glimpse that we've got tonight, that the terms that you use are part of not just sort of how you work, but I think we can see how you are. And we look forward to experiencing more of that as we work with you. We know based on what Guy said, it's getting a little late for Cassidy, so we appreciate you still being here. And we look forward to nation building together. There is something about that phrase that sort of stirred something in me. So hopefully it stirred something in the rest of us as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gerber. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you through the mayor. I just want to say miigwech to Cassidy, Bob, Melissa, Guy, to my fellow councillors and staff. This has been a long journey. I'm looking forward to working with reconciliation together. Obviously the Wilmot community as well. We can put everything in our hearts and our souls and do the right work and heal and move forward. So let's do that. Miigwech.
Thank you, Councillor Hallman. And thank you to the Fab Four for coming and visiting with us and expressing your desire to help us through this. And we're really looking forward to it. And the coming months will be really special. So I'm not sure if we need to get you matching uniforms or not, but we do appreciate your coming and putting in the hard work and helping us out. Thank you. Councillor Fanning.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yes, miigwech, merci. Thank you. For me, the word that sticks out the most is hope. I am a hopeful person, and the last year has been hard on everyone around the world in a lot of different ways. And for me, the thing that keeps me going is hope. I always have hope, and I hope, and I hold on to that hope that this is a crucible that will make us stronger. So thank you for being part of our journey, and thank you for being here tonight.
Mr. Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I'm going to echo what my fellow councillors have said. I'm very optimistic and very excited about you four helping us. Obviously, you can see we have some work ahead of us, and I know primarily a lot of it has to do with the Prime Minister's path, but I think you four are really going to help us as a whole community with all our issues. So I'm very excited about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fisher. So that will be it for that. We do have a recommendation to go with that, and that the Information Legislative Services Quarterly Activity Report for January 1st to March 31st, 2021 be received for information. And that is moved by Councillor Fanning, Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That's carried. So that's it, folks. So Cassidy can run off to bed now and be ready first thing in the morning.
I'm going to tell you her nickname is Grandma Cass. So.
Good night,
everybody.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much, everyone.
All right, good night. Good night. Yeah, Councillor Fanning, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong, to the clerk and her department. Yes, this was the biggest discussion item on your report, but I would like to point out that, you know, there are a whole lot of other great things that have been happening in your department, and certainly while this is obviously, you know, very important to the community, there are other important things that are happening as well, and noted that the rest of your report did get read as well.
That's for sure. Okay, so the next item is Councillor Gordick.
Thank you through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just to sort of reiterate with Councillor Fed, and just to sort of give a shout out to Aaron and Kelly and Tracy, the sort of the people there that helped you with within that department. So just to let you guys know that we did read it. We know their names, and to thank everybody for their hard work and getting the report together for tonight's meeting. So thank you. Appreciate the time.
Well, I think Aaron will be nervous about you knowing her name. Okay. Next item comes from Development Services, if they're still on the call here.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. I'll make
Go
this
ahead.
very brief. The report is self-explanatory. The attachment to the report illustrates a proposed sign for Crestman Meats, and the recommendation from staff is to approve variances to the setbacks of the current sign bylaw to accommodate the sign on this property. And certainly could answer any questions if you do have any.
Any questions from anybody? I think it's pretty straightforward. Councillor Fenning.
I'll just say that I think it makes a good deal of sense for them to let us all know that they're there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so the recommendation that council approve minor variances to township sign bylaw 2002-68 for a sign to be installed at 562 Huron Street in New Hamburg as follows: to allow a sign in front of the required building line on a property having frontage less than 15 meters, and to reduce the required side yard setback from 3 meters to approximately 1 meter. And that is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. There's no correspondence. And the next item is that bylaw numbers 2021, 2023, and 2021, 24, and 2021, 26 be introduced, read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. That's moved by Councillor Gerber, Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Other notice of motions, announcements. Councillor Hallman.
I think it was a race there between Councillor Gerber and I. Okay, I just wanted to, I have two things on my list. One is that there has been an uptick of crime in Ward 1, specifically in New Dundee. And while we have been, a lot of us in the rural communities, sometimes we get overly comfortable with leaving doors unlocked or leaving cars unlocked or sheds unlocked. Due diligence is the time, it's tough times for people out there, and we need to protect our own possessions. So just a reminder to, it's our responsibility to secure our things. So please do that, and please give friendly reminders to your loved ones in your life that that old habits die hard, but it's in the best interest to keep our home safe and secure in our possessions. Second is my plea to please register for your COVID vaccine. Take the first vaccine that's available to you. Please look at the Wilmot Township website, social media. They are often tweeting several times in the week about where the pharmacies are within Wilmot that you can get vaccinated, or within Waterloo region. And if you need help with registering, if you're finding the process overwhelming or daunting, I know that your counselors in your wards want to help you be registered as safely as possible. So please reach out to any one of us. We want our community to be safe.
Well, just on that thing about locking your doors and stuff, I'll give you a quick thing. When I was on the police force, I got sent to a farm. The farmer's car was stolen. Next day I was called to say that was recovered a couple of concessions away, and it wasn't far from where you live, Councillor Hallman. And so I went down, picked up the farmer. We went and got his truck or his car, brought it back to his house. And as we get out of the cars and to walk in to take the report, I asked him where his keys were, and they were still in the ignition, as where they had been when the car was stolen. So sometimes it takes a bit of time to learn, but hopefully people will learn quickly. Councillor Gerber.
Thank you. I could have referenced this when we looked at the Parks, Facilities, Recreational Services Quarterly Report, item 11.5, but it just went by too fast for me then. Anyway, just a quick announcement from within Ms. Jackson's department. Congratulations to Lacey and Trent on the birth of their new daughter over the weekend. And then it has some operational impacts. So congrats to, congrats. I mean, Ashley will be covering part of Lacey's maternity leave in the rec programming area, Crystal in the Youth Action Council area. I know Youth Week is coming up. And also congrats to Haley, the new Youth Action Committee coordinator. So all the best to them in their new roles, and all the best to Lacey and hers.
Absolutely. I saw her picture. She's quite a cutie. Councillor Fenning.
Well, Councillor Hallman stole my thunder on the vaccines, but can't reinforce it enough. So for anybody who missed it on social media or the other methods of communication, essential workers are now able to pre-register. And I know several people who have been able to register and get vaccinated within days of making a call. So get out there, get on the phone, and yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need assistance in navigating the system.
That's absolutely correct. I had my vaccination a couple of weeks ago, and I've had a couple of emails which I've forwarded on to Dr. Wong, that people from out this way who have nothing but praise for the way things went in the process. So yes, indeed, everybody should, and it's broadening, and the supplies are increasing, and hopefully they'll be able to meet all their targets over the next little while. Okay, seeing no further announcements. So I have the confirmatory bylaw recommendation, that bylaw number 2125, to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on April 26, 2021, be introduced, read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. And that is moved by Councillor Fisher, Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. And now it is recommended that we do now adjourn to meet again at the call of the mayor. Well, everybody puts their hand up. What's going on? Anyway, we'll go with Councillor Fisher, Councillor Gordick, and I'm sure that nobody's going to put their hand up now. All in favor? Oh, two at a time. That's really good. That's really good. We get 10 votes out of 5 people. That's perfect. Anyway, good night, everyone, and I appreciate your staff for staying up. And you can all sleep in an extra 2 or 3 minutes in the morning, but you just can't be late.
Good night. Stay safe.